I still have my Pratt shirt. I can't, I was a special occasion.
And there's our band teacher.
He's just tagging along on tour. You know, yeah.
New and two unconnected.
I know. It takes a little more than 30 days, but if you
Well, my inside stuff is healed finally after 3 years, and I'm working on my back. I lost over 80 pounds, but not really helping my back. So I'm still swimming every day.
How's Randy doing?
But,
How are you
better,
doing?
a lot better than when I met you in the fall, that's for sure. No. Is this one for me? Oh, thank you.
What you working on today?
They want to use 2 more levels. Okay.
No, okay.
I didn't have good results on the first one. And it's 50-50. And the more you fuse, the more you have. It's weight on the next.
Down in Texas that 10 days ago, the still goes 35 prices all those and aggressive. And I lost 3.
Where? In his neck or back?
Back.
Oh.
He does not know yet what he may have.
When was this? Yesterday? No.
No, it happened like 10 days ago.
What's that? Move up here, a little more sociable.
It's tough.
Was it in his low back?
Yeah.
The tough part, I didn't, until I hurt my back, I didn't have any idea how part of your anatomy because it carries all of the load of your upper body.
I saw Harvey in the Wall Street Journal and lower back health problem people.
Yeah, like you're I didn't have any choice because when my two discs burst, they burst into my spinal canal, and so I had to have emergency surgery. Well, I know, and I'm really looking forward to growing old because it's just gonna get worse, all over everything.
Well, you gotta make sure you're.
Robert, you are Alan's father, aren't you? You know, I went to the big meeting, at the Household, and I saw Alan and Kelly, and I saw Cameron, and I don't know your grandson's name.
Yeah.
Riley? Okay. I saw the whole crowd there, and I thought, Alan and Kelly got down to Comanche for this. I wonder why. And I see him afterwards, I'm like, duh. I don't know why it never occurred to me. How many children do you have? I only know 2.
Son in Texas.
Yeah. Oh. I followed in his father's footsteps. That's a big change.
Yeah, we did that for about a year and a half, and then we had locked out.
Oh.
Yeah, and he did not see isolation.
Oh. And so you ended up in Ellensburg with this manager. Were you city manager here in the 80s? Oh yeah, I didn't go until 92. No, that's not 2000. 2000.
Yeah, I had to replace one here about 3 weeks ago. No.
Yeah.
Good community.
Oh, she's on this committee. Okay,
Where did you get your kids behave themselves?
AU works just fine.
Yeah.
Hi. Nope, you're totally fine. I'm just going to make sure I have the PowerPoint ordered.
Well, we came here in 1988. It was tight.
Okay.
Yeah, but I see.
Come down there.
Yes. Brian would probably, he gave me some tips on maybe see if you should lend stuff. really uninformed. Okay. I think everybody that's in the tour is on, so everybody knows direction about that.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. As you saw, the published time to start was 6:30, so we're going to all walk backwards about 15 minutes and get back here at 6:30. So we'll walk around the building about 7 times, and by that point we should be at 6:30. Does that sound unreasonable? No? Okay. Well, my way of saying we apologize. We had tours organized for committee members and members of the public who wanted to see the school. We had 3 different groups touring around the school, and it took a little longer than we anticipated. We ran into some locked doors and people kind of trying to be in the same space at the same time. Didn't work very well. I'm Matt Fairbank. I'm the director of the Dispute Resolution Center of Yakima and Kittitas Counties. Tonight's the second meeting of the Strategic Facilities Planning Committee of the Ellensburg School District. And the committee is hearing tonight 3 presentations, one from the staff here at Morgan Middle School, one from each of the 2 architectural firms that have done research work and studies with the school district and with the Moms Group, Modernize Our Morgan, and they will be presenting over the course of the time that we're here tonight. The focus is on asking the committee members to have their questions answered by all 3 presentations. We also want to give a chance for the public to do so, but what we're doing is we're asking the members of the public who are not on the committee to write your questions down, and then I'll be kind of gathering those up at the end of each presentation, and if we have time, asking those. If we don't have time, those will be presented to the folks who are speaking so that they can respond to those later on. So when you see these coming around, please take 1 or 2. I've got pens. We can just send those around as well. And I would like the pens back at the end of the time so that we can use these next time we come together. And if you have questions, please do write them down. We're also going to ask the committee members to hold their questions until the end of each of the presentations, well, actually the end of the Morgan Middle School presentation. And then we'll have the group that's been working with the school district on facilities work since 2000, Hill International, do kind of a presentation at the beginning of each of the presentations, and then a wrap-up at the end, and then we'll ask for questions from the committee verbally and members of the community in writing. So if you can just take these and send them around. Michelle, I think we're ready, unless Ferris, do we have anything else we want to add before they have the Morgan Middle School presentation? Come on.
Okay.
Send these around.
Welcome to Morgan Middle School. It's always great to have an opportunity to have people into the building and give you a chance to showcase our program. And one of the things that I'm most excited about tonight is that hopefully we will be able to help provide just some understanding of middle-level education in general and how we work really hard to try and make that happen efficiently. So I'm going to invite my fellow presenters up. Tonight with me I have Kevin Dwight. Kevin is a science teacher, teaches 6th, 7th, and 8th grade science here. I have Donna Grassel. She teaches 7th grade math. Joan Smith is our life skills vocational teacher in special education. Oli Hall and Kathy Delvo representing our fabulous PE department. Kevin Chersvik, who's one of your committee members, is going to help, and he teaches 6th grade block. And Mike Popovsky, who will be joining us in a few minutes, he just went to try and start getting some of the doors locked that we had open. So he'll be joining us in time for his portion of the presentation, and he teaches 6th grade block and elective classes. I have a very hefty packet for our committee members. Certainly not all of it is going to be covered tonight, but I wanted to make sure. This is different than what I sent you earlier. Last week I was able to send the committee some paperwork just giving some initial information about room usage, a map of the school, and so over the course of the last week we've been putting together a presentation for you. In the handouts you have a map of the school that indicates what is taught in the classrooms, not the classroom teacher who is in there. You have one of the things that was asked was for square footage of the different areas, so there's a breakdown of that in there. There's some handouts that will go along with our presentation tonight, so you can take notes or jot down questions if you have them. And then in addition, I have put in there a survey that was done by the staff in February of 2005, which was, at that time, they were talking about what kinds of things they needed if they were to get a building and what kinds of challenges that they faced. And then at a staff meeting a couple weeks ago, I asked the staff, what would it look like to have 21st century education and 21st century learning going on in our school? And so I included just a list of theirs. It's not categorized. We just wanted to make sure and get that in your hands. One of the things that I noticed in comparing the 2012 survey to the 2005 survey was that there wasn't a lot of change. And one of the things that it struck me, and it made me a little bit sad in thinking about what 21st century learning could look like, was the need for multiple outlets in a classroom. And it really hit home for me that one of the challenges that we're facing is providing 21st century education in a building that is nowhere near that, and trying to get up to that point of having multiple outlets in a classroom, which at this point should not be an issue. But that's just information, I just editorializing. And then I provided a couple of articles from a parenting magazine on middle school education, just some information about middle school. And then at the very back, there's a handout on something called Scimatech, Science, Math, Technology, that I'll elaborate on a little bit, and then that's just provides some information for you. So those are your handouts, and with that, I will turn it over to Donna Grasso.
I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. It's kind of nice to look around at this wide range of people sitting here on the committee, because I started ticking off how many of you have had children. And it's at least half of the people sitting here that have had their kids in class over the last 20 years. I've been asked to give you just a brief overview of what a middle school student is like, and what this age is all about, and how we at Morgan approach educating them. And I started just thinking, I'm going to tell you a couple of articles, but I thought, if you were really interested in what a middle school student is all about, it took me less than 5 minutes to go through a few bookshelves and just find, here's one, Managing the Madness, Practical Guide to Middle Grade Classroom. Just all of these books were written about middle school in particular, and these just came from a couple of our bookshelves. It's just amazing how much information is out there, how much research is out there about what educating young adolescents should be all about. So I have a poem to start with that is called What is a Middle Schooler? And I don't really know.
Bottom button.
Bottom arrow.
Ah, there we go. The picture says 1,000 words, right? I did not Photoshop this. I want you to know that. It really looks Photoshopped. It looks like the taller student Cody has been enlarged or is standing a few feet in front of Trace, but he's not. That's exactly how they match up in the hallway. What is a middle schooler? This was written by an 8th grader, not one of our students. What is a middle schooler? I was asked one day. I know what he was, but what should I say? She is noise and confusion. She is silence that is deep. She is sunshine and laughter, or a cloud that will weep. He is swift as an arrow. He's a waster of time. He wants to be rich, but he can't save a dime. She shows some defiance, and she is polite as can be. She wants parental guidance, but yet she wants to be free. He is aggressive and bossy. He is timid and shy. He knows all the answers, but he still will ask why. She is awkward and clumsy. She is graceful and poised. She is ever-changing, but do not be annoyed. What is a middle schooler? I was asked one day. He is the future unfolding. So stick around and help guide his way. And that is exactly what we see right there, just that array of total contrast that you get in a middle school student. And I'm sure that everybody up here has had the opportunity at a dinner party or social gathering to be asked that question. So what do you do for a living? And when you tell them you're a middle school teacher, you get all kinds of interesting reactions. But I think it's because we remember what it was like to be a middle schooler. And we remember that. And we remember all of that drama and the lunchroom, and we don't remember the classes, but we remember the teachers, and we remember our peers, and all of those things that go with it. So here we are. Middle school is that wonderful, wonderful, engaging place of learning for adolescents who are in the midst of enormous changes. Those changes are physical, as you see in the picture, emotional, because we've all had that in our homes, intellectual, this is that stage of just questioning and wondering, and everything is wide open, and of course, very social as well. So when we look at just all of those contrasts, it is a great age to be working with. These are just pictures of some of our kids in the last few days. The intellectual, the social, the physical. It just is a wonderful clash of everything in our hallways and in our classrooms. What I really like about this age is that they want to be doing things that are truly relevant. They might not care about the ancient history of China, but get them talking about the 2012 election, and it's a totally different story. So they really want to be engaging in crucial issues of their day and their age. So at this age, we find that our students are forming those attitudes and values and habits of mind that will be the foundation as they go on into high school. We see students in the upper left, one of our students who is in a leadership organization called La Chispa, and they're organizing a food drive. They love that kind of thing, where they feel like they're making a difference. They love to write and sign petitions. We have one going around right now about the gun policy. They love to celebrate. And truly, these pictures, I just took these in the last couple days, and I just walked down the hallway, and there they were, celebrating Laura's birthday. And they love to get into that kind of thing. They're very passionate and loyal to their friends. They didn't pose for these pictures. They really were involved in science that day when I walked in Kevin's classroom. They're very engaging. So I think it's that wonderful time when you're not just laying a foundation, but just totally becoming who you're going to be as an adult. And this is just where it just all opens up for them. So when we look at responding to that array of students and all of those changes that are taking place for them, then we really look at finding schools where interaction will be promoted between the students, the staff, and of course the families, and having an infrastructure which will encourage that student inquiry and build that solid foundation for continuing their education. I feel strongly about this age. It's a great age to work with, and it's our duty, it's our obligation, and it's also our honor and opportunity to work with these kids. So that's my part, and Michelle is next.
When the committee had asked at the last meeting to understand a little bit better about our programs and what we do here, I think it's really important to start with, based on what Donna shared, it feeds right into our school mission statement. Morgan Middle School's mission is to cultivate habits of excellence for a changing world by fostering inquiry, identity, and interaction in all students. We get these kids. We love working with these kids. And so to be able to start this process and lay a foundation so that they can be successful in life is our mission in life. That's just why we show up every day. A little bit about who we are. Currently, as of our last count, we have 702 students. Those students break down to 251 sixth graders, and it goes to 218 eighth graders. So we definitely have bubbles of students that come through our program. And next year, while we will lose 218 eighth graders, we will be gaining approximately 231 fifth graders. So we start to get a little bit increase again. So it's constantly in flux. 36% of our students qualify for free or reduced lunch. We have an English language learners program, students who are new to the country or have been here and have not sufficiently acquired the English language to be able to use it in the classroom, qualify for a program called ELL. We have 34 students enrolled in that. 73 students qualify for special education. 65 students qualify for our highly capable program. And we have a learning assistance program which provides support for students in reading and math, and currently we have about 77 students receiving support in that program. I know one of the questions that's come up from the committee has been enrollment. And so in your package, you have this on your handout. I've provided, I'm trying to figure out a place to stand so that everybody can see. So I provided a 2-year chart and enrollment data by the month for those 2 years so that you can get a sense of what we're doing. We opened this year at 736 students. Most of the students we've lost this year, it's been encouraging for the families. We've had a lot of families get jobs out of town. So maybe they didn't have one, and so now, but it takes them out of here, and so we lose out on the kids, but we're happy for the families. Transportation. Being in this pocket of the community, we're interested in knowing how do kids get to school every day, and how important is that, how much of a factor is that. So we did a survey of our students' second period. 36% of our students ride the school bus. 54.4% of the students get a ride to school, and 9.6% of the students walk or ride their bike. You'll notice in these pictures here, there's a little double parking going on in on the street right across over here, and so at about 2:45, you'll see people. It's kind of entertaining sometimes to watch because they sort of pull in and like pretend that there's a parking spot and actually back up a little bit and strategically place themselves, and then it just has trickled down. So we had 6 cars double parked here for our students to get picked up from school the other day, and our buses here down on the bottom picture that are street side. So that's a little bit about who we are. One of the things that I didn't want to misrepresent tonight, in going through the facilities manual, it's very clear that there is a separate process called educational specifications. You'll hear it referred to as ed specs a lot. And I want to be very clear that this is not the process that we have taken on. This is our brainstorming, our wishing, our hoping for our future. And so I included a quote from the facilities manual that talks about that the ed specs should state what is good educationally, not what may be common practice. They should not be limited by economic constraints or other restrictions. They should be concerned with attaining improved educational experiences and conditions. Separate process that would typically take place after a bond was passed where you can start designing the building. But I just wanted to be very clear that that's not what we've engaged in here. Mr. Chersbeck.
Yes, ma'am. All right, I get the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about what a typical student gets program-wise here at our school. You got a tour, for those who got the tour of the building, you saw the framework in which we provide that program. You saw the demographics, the number of kids, and the breakdown there as far as what those faces are when they come in our building. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what our program is. We do teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade here, which is the middle school model. In 6th grade, it's a 7-period day for all the kids. 6th grade, they get social studies, language arts, and reading. And we provide that here in a 3-period block. So most of the kids that come through our doors as 6th graders will be with one teacher for 3 periods of that particular day, which is kind of a nice transition from that elementary school where they're going with the one teacher all the time, as opposed to being thrown right into the fire with 7 different teachers. So now they've got 1 period with, or 3 periods with one teacher, kind of transition them into the middle school program. Along with those 3 classes, they also get math, science, health and fitness, and an elective throughout the day. When they move on to 7th grade, they still get the social studies and language arts. They have a choice of getting a reading program, depending on their reading levels and recommendations from teachers, or they can opt out of that and get a second elective. Math, science, health and fitness, and again, that elective. And then at 8th grade, they have social studies, language arts, an elective, 2 electives, math, science, and PE. So that's our typical day. There we go. Middle school philosophy is to give those kids as many experiences as you can get them. They don't know. They're kind of finding their way. So in our building here, these are the elective choices that we do provide to our children at some point in time. So 6th grade, you can see all the opportunities that they have, band, orchestra, choir, introduction to art, speech, keyboarding, a computer applications class, and a study skills class. In 7th grade, they have band, orchestra, choir, 2D and 3D art, DigiTools computer programming class, math enrichment, CAD program, and then the shop also. And then in 8th grade is Spanish, Explore Ellensburg, leadership, forensic science, study skills, and at the 8th grade levels, kids can also have the opportunity to be an office assistant or a teacher's assistant within our building. Necessary extras. Peer and social pressures, drug and alcohol awareness, career exploration, student support groups, grief, divorce, those types of things. Peer mediation, so conflict resolution, dealing with peers that are mediating groups. Leadership and community service opportunities. And then our specialized programs for all grades. We have special education, we have a resource room, so those classes that are targeting math, reading, and writing. And we also have the life skills vocational training. The highly capable, or the QUEST, in this case substitutes for reading in 6th grade and language arts in 7th and 8th grade. So kids that qualify for this, if I have a kid that's in my block class and is in QUEST, I lose him for that reading program. So he opts out of reading and goes to the QUEST classroom. The ELL students, English language learners, and these are classes based on need for English support. And math enrichment. So if a student is below grade level or struggling passing MSP, they get another booster class in math to help them get along the way a little bit. And Joan.
Okay, I'm here to kind of give you an idea of what special education looks like in our middle school. This first slide, I'm going to look at it all the way first. Currently we have a life skills vocational space, and if you went on the tour, you saw that great big room down at the end of the hall, and that is the life skills vocational space. And I'm sure many of you walked in there and went, oh my gosh, this is so big. And I fill every inch of that room with kids in wheelchairs, kids with adaptive equipment, and kids that are learning vocational skills in my room. We also have related services that kids receive, speech therapy and occupational therapy. Right now, those services are provided in a tiny little office that could not fit this table. And they see groups anywhere from 2 to 10 kids crammed in a little room around the table, because those teachers, those specialists, do not have a space right now in our building. And at this time we have 3 of what are being called traditional classrooms. Those are the teachers that are teaching reading, writing, and math to the majority of the kids that are receiving special education. These kids are also going to all those classes that Kevin was talking about, the electives, social studies, science, but they are receiving their core academic subjects in a resource room. We also provide study skills for kids in order to help them if they're struggling in reading and writing. They might also be struggling in science and social studies. So we have a study skills class that helps those kids, and also a social skills class that is being taught. This is our first year with it, and it is working wonderfully for kids that are struggling with behavior issues or other social things. This, of course, this top one is my priority. Like I said, I fill every inch of that room in that you saw down at the end of the hallway with my kids. We would like to see a larger space for those specialists that come in and work with those small groups of kids doing speech and occupational therapy. They can do nothing activity-based out of their seats where they are right now because they don't have enough space. And we would also anticipate needing, as the school population grows, so is the special ed population, and we would probably eventually be needing a 4th classroom to teach those basic reading and writing skills. So that just gives you a comparison of what we have and what we anticipate needing in the future. To focus specifically on my program, to give you an idea of why I fill up all that space and why I think I still need it. Part of my program is teaching personal care, hygiene to kids that need this. Remember this, my students that I work with are not academic focused kids. And right now I have one tiny little bathroom that once a wheelchair goes in there, nobody else can be in there with them. There's not enough space. So while it's wheelchair accessible, it's not fully wheelchair accessible. We do laundry up to 3 loads a day. Not only are we doing laundry that our classroom creates, but I also wash things for PE department, wash the straps that they use, help out the art classroom. I do all of the laundry, my students do all the laundry for them. So it's not just a favor for them, it's teaching my kids how to manage themselves when they leave high school, how to take care of their own personal needs. I have non-ambulatory students. Right now I have 1. Within 2 years I will have a minimum of 3 in my classroom. So these are kids that are in wheelchairs. With that comes a lot of technology. We talk about being a 21st century school, and the 21st century in the world of special education is technology. Adaptive equipment, specialized computers, laptops, physical therapy needs, and those things take up quite a bit of space. The one student that I have right now, all of her equipment just barely fits in a 20 by 10 foot area. So if you put, and she has an adult with her, so you add 2 or 3 more kids in wheelchairs with those kind of equipment needs and more adult bodies, you can see that there needs to be quite a bit of space. I run a vocational program. Some of you here have bought lunches from me. My students prepare lunches every single week that we sell to staff members. Not only is this helping kids learn a job skill that they can take with them when they leave school and hopefully help them become employable, but we also work on independent cooking. How are they going to scramble eggs? How are they going to make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches? Those are things that we use daily in my classroom, and we use a tiny little kitchen space, and we make do with it, but having a little bit bigger space where kids can be working on all these skills at the same time would be wonderful. And at the same time, we are doing reading and writing and math in my classroom. And again, 21st century school, we are using lots and lots of adaptive technology for kids in order for them to improve their reading and writing skills as much as they can. And then here's just a few pictures that we took. You can see the one student up here has adaptive switches so that she can run a pencil sharpener. This is a young lady who doesn't speak and cannot walk on her own, but she can operate a switch so that she can run anything mechanized that we can plug into it. So she could run a blender, and like I said, she could run a pencil sharpener for somebody. This picture up here is the lunch program. The kids are setting up the salad trays in order to put out a bunch of lunches. Whoops.
What button did you push so I don't do it?
I'm not telling. So here's the kitchen set up now, and students are learning how to make the soup. Here's my laundry facilities, and this is the same student right here in some adaptive equipment that does allow her to stand for periods of time to have weight-bearing stuff on, pressure on her legs, and so that's just kind of a brief little picture of what might go on in my classroom and why the vocational program is so important in our world. And next, I don't know. Click it.
It's Mr. McLaughlin.
Well, this isn't gonna work. Barely. I'll make it work. Thank you. I'll go back to one picture here. This young lady here, if you've ever met her, she absolutely will melt your heart. She is such a sweet young lady, and the fact that she doesn't speak just melts my heart. So, physical space here at Morgan, I want to talk to you a little bit about that. We currently sit on a campus of 6.8 acres.
We have 110,000 square feet. A little over 9,000 of that is our Performing Arts Center. About 2,500 square feet of that is our fixed bleachers in the gymnasium, which are unusable as far as educational purposes. We have this library, which is quite adequate for our needs at this time. Some of our anticipated needs. OSPI recommends 10 acres for a middle school plus 1 acre for every 100 students. So that would mean that we would recommend between 17 and 19 acres. You know, I've traveled to New York City a number of times, and most of their schools sit on a lot about this size, a postage stamp size lot. And I've really never understood why in a city of Ellensburg where we have lots of space to spread out, why we haven't had the opportunity to do that yet. Our goal would be to have 126,000 square feet of educational space. We need cafeteria or commons that would allow for flexible use, that can accommodate more students. Those of you who were on the tour saw that we are now having to take our 700 and some odd students and split them into 3 lunches to fit in our small cafeteria. And that space becomes unusable, obviously, during and before and after the lunch hour as well. So it really is not an educational space for us. And again, on a library, we would want a comparable space for our library. As we look ahead, we're not sure what libraries will look like in the 21st century. They are changing in a lot of areas, and that's something through the Ed Spec Committee we would really need to discuss and talk about what does a modern library look like. But we definitely feel like this is an adequate space for us to be able to have our kids in multiple learning areas. The fine arts for me have a special place in my heart. When I was in 6th grade, I was in band and played the trombone. When I moved to 7th grade, I had to make a decision because we were only allowed 1 elective. And so my choice was either band or shop and architecture. And I really wanted to take the shop and architecture classes, and so I ended up going that path. While I use my shop and my architecture skills that I had over the next 6 years, I use those on a pretty much daily basis now. I still regret the fact that I didn't get to participate in the fine arts more because I dropped out of band. And so as a result of that, I tend to try and live vicariously through our music and arts programs that we have here at Morgan. Again, we have about a 9,000 square foot auditorium facility at this time, which includes the balcony space. It has fixed seating, which limits our ability to use it for anything other than concerts, assemblies, and sometimes we have the kids sit in there at lunch and listen to music. That really limits us. Occasionally we'll have some large class activities in there, but it's pretty rare. I covered all this. The Ellensburg High School also uses our auditorium for their concerts and then the winter musical, which is my favorite part of the whole thing. I love our winter musicals. Space is not an issue. Our auditorium is a decent size. It certainly needs some additional things like wing and fly space, dressing room space, those types of things, sound improvement, lighting and wiring improvements. Fixed seating in an auditorium is good, and we should certainly have some fixed seating, but it would be really nice if we had some flexible seating arrangements as well to allow for other types of activities that we could, do shared space. And I don't think any of us here is interested in a cafetorium, which was the plan of the 70s, where you took a cafeteria and stuck a stage at the end of it and called that your Performing Arts Center. We aren't interested in that. We want a good Performing Arts Center. But it does need to be space that allows us to use during the day for educational uses as well. We would continue to use our auditorium for class assemblies, for activities, concerts, our winter musical, and those types of things. And a modern space might allow us to use that 9,000 square foot space on a more regular basis. It's always really sad to me that we've got 9,000 square feet that honestly sits there unused most of the time. And it's really too bad that we have that space that we can't use on a regular basis. For the fine arts, we currently have 2 music rooms for 3 programs. We don't use those rooms every period of the day. Band doesn't, for instance, use those every period of the day, nor does choir. So 2 rooms for 3 programs is actually adequate for what we do, for our band, choir, and strings or orchestra program. We have some practice rooms. They're quite small, fairly inadequate. We have an art room that's almost 5,000 square feet that seems to work well for our art teacher, but it's kind of a funky configuration. So we would again still feel like for our music program, we would continue to need 2 classrooms. We would need to have increased practice rooms. It would need to have, she didn't put it on here, but we need additional storage space as well. For those of you who are on my tour, you may have heard me say that most of our instruments are laid out in the hallway during the day. So they get tripped over, kicked, sometimes stolen, because there really is no secure way for us to hold those instruments in the small space that we've got. The art room, 5,000 square feet, designed for instruction and workspace. An increased space for student work display and storage. And one of the things I really love about Ellensburg High School, the new high school, is they have all of those cubes in the hallways there. They've got some great display spaces for kids to display their artwork and their activities and those types of things. And that's something we would hope for in any facility that we choose to to build. And then finally, natural light. Most of us didn't get to go in the art room, but it has very little natural light. And I'm not an artist, but from those who paint and draw that I've talked to, they do tell me that they require a lot of natural light to really make the colors and so on come forth. And so we would want that. And then attached to outdoor space, so they have an opportunity to get out into nature, to be able to paint, draw, and sculpt through nature. Here's an example in our choir room. Some folks play. Is that me? Am I
Yes.
right?
Mr. Dwight?
Mr. Blythe!
Why, thank you very much. I was thinking while I was standing here listening, Donna's books, I'm Kevin Dwight, by the way, the other Kevin. So there's two of us, and we often get confused by the students. If you find yourself in the same situation, you understand, you totally understand. But I could maybe borrow your books, Donna, and my wife could get a better understanding of me. Because sometimes there's that void.
I'll pick out a few just for her.
Thank you. Just what she needs. So one of the things that's interesting, when we look at what we have in terms of traditional teaching spaces here at Morgan, you begin to look at the numbers, and you see here that we're currently set up 3 science classrooms, 11 classrooms for humanities. And you kind of go down the list, and then you look at what we actually need. And we currently need 5 classrooms for science, and we have 3. So that means that we're currently using 2 classrooms that are not intended for science, and we're teaching science in those classrooms, and they work, but they're not optimal. And so we need additional classrooms for humanities. We need 1 additional classroom, or we anticipate an additional need for a math classroom. We have an additional need for another ELL, LEP support classroom. And so those traditional learning spaces here at Morgan, when you look at them, you know, you've been on the tour of the building, you've been around, you've seen these. You stop in the science wing, you notice the rooms look very different. So the traditional spaces versus the science spaces, children just need an opportunity to, we need different kinds of equipment, different kinds of space. And so the sciences, because we have those special needs, a lot like some of the other programs that you hear about, there are a whole slew of things. So I mean, you begin to pick out 5 things off that list, and they look very different than a traditional classroom. You know, everything from tile floors, which are, you know, noisier but necessary. Specialized tables. These tables just wouldn't work out in a science classroom. It wouldn't last very long. It wouldn't be a wise investment. To otherwise specialized safety equipment. In addition to that, space that you wouldn't normally expect to need in a traditional classroom. We need more space in a science classroom. We need not only storage space, we need space for kids to be able to get up and move around when they're doing hands-on inquiry-based learning. We're giving them an opportunity to discover and figure out, you know, how to explain their world by interacting with it. And so it looks a little bit different than maybe what you can recall your science classroom looking like. I don't presume to understand what your science experience looked like. Mine was a very traditional experience. The opportunity we're giving kids today is a much more engaging, hands-on, exciting, well, hopefully I can say engaging. I'm making some assumptions there, but hopefully you could probably ask around and find out, see what they say. The one thing that I will mention that is on that list that I think is probably something that stands out for me as a science teacher is just the fact that we need additional, not only in addition to that traditional classroom space, but we need that specialized lab space, and we need the ability to keep your kids safe. The students just need physical space to move around. They need to be able to get up, take the equipment from place to place without bumping into each other, and the space requirements. Currently, we have decent space in the classroom for 24 students. The class sizes go beyond that, and they typically do 90% of the time. We're bumping into each other, you know, dropping beakers and test tubes, things like that. But for the most part, we have what we need. And so we don't necessarily have the science classrooms that we need. Again, we're too short right now. We anticipate needing 3 more. But other than that, we may do. You asked us what we wanted, and there you go.
All right. All right.
Thanks for being here today. I want to give this stuff. I like this a lot. It's kind of fun.
So my name's Oli Hall, and a little bit about me. This is my third year teaching at Morgan. I am a lifelong resident. I went to school here. The gym that I teach in is the exact same gym and your daughter and I went to school. Okay. there's not a lot that's changed. We do have one of the better programs for PE around this area. We have a program and a staff that's nationally known, that's been asked to speak at local, state, and national conferences. And we're proud of that. We're really proud of that. Some of the other good things we have is our curriculum. It's aligned to the national and state standards. It's also aligned vertically and horizontally. And our curriculum is based on lifelong physical activity. And if you think about the news, think back to the past week, past month. Think about everything that comes with physical activity, the positive benefits. That's what we're trying to teach them. And probably 2-3 weeks ago, I had a teachable moment. I had one of my students, and it kind of caught me off guard. I thought, why don't they know? He said, Mr. Hall, why were you out jogging on Saturday? What were you doing? And I kind of looked at him, and he was serious. And I said, well, I need some physical activity. And he goes, you're a PE teacher. You don't need to do that. And so I thought, okay, this is a great time to explain how important it is, to reiterate it, to keep it going. And so one of the things that we really push is lifelong physical activity. In our curriculum, we still have a few traditional sports activities, but it's mainly geared towards physical fitness. And one of the great things our program has is heart rate monitors. And for us as PE teachers, it takes the guesswork out. I don't have to look at a student and say, are they working hard enough? It's not about my perception. It's about what they're doing. And at the end of the class, if I thought, boy, I don't know if they're working hard enough. If they've met the expectation, they've earned the grade. It's all about what they've earned, not what my perception is. So we're proud of that we've given the control to the students to say, you know what, if I want an A, I'm going to go out and earn it. And I think it's a really positive thing. Do they love them? Not necessarily. Not right now. Not right now. I know that Mr. Dwight, he had the chance to use them when we first got them, and
Changed my life.
Who knew? But that's our main focus. Some of the things that we have currently. Okay.
My name's Kathy Delvo. I've been at Morgan for 14 years now. And what we currently have are 5 teachers in one traditional gym. How many of you have seen the movie Hoosiers? There's anywhere from 3 to 4 classes in that gym at one time. We do, in the winter times, we do use the mat room, so one class will go up to the mat room, 2 classes will be in the gym, so you have 2 classes of 30 plus in that little gym trying to do, different activities. And then we have the fitness room down at the end that has some of our cardio equipment in. Right now it's a bunch of storage. And then the locker area, which we call the tiger cage, it's fenced off, that we've got our strength equipment. And that will take 1 class. So you'd have 1 class in the cage, 1 class in the upper gym, and then 2 classes in the main gym in a typical period doing activities. So we're anxious to get outside as soon as possible to our outdoor space, but our outdoor space is, our fields that we have out there, our tennis courts, and then there's times where we're overcrowded on our main field out here, where we'll come over and we'll use this other side with another class, depending on what our activities are. Health. We don't have a health room right now, so we go to the teachers that are on prep periods and ask if we can use their classrooms. We use the library when it's available, and
kind of just go anywhere we can for health, which leads into anticipated needs.
Okay. Some of our anticipated needs are, we need, instead of 5 teachers, we're going to need more teachers, more students, more teachers. Okay? And equivalent space to 2 gyms. Doesn't necessarily have to be 2 gyms, but the area we're in right now, I would invite you to come in the wintertime when there's 120 kids in that gym space, and just sit and watch for a little bit, and there's not words to describe it. But we'd like some additional space, a mat room for our wrestling program. Ellensburg has always had a strong wrestling program. It's also a great space for PE, dual use, and we'd love to see that a little bit bigger. A little bit bigger. They have to tape some pads up the walls for safety, and we'd like a great space for our kids to be physically active. We need a cardio weight room that's bigger than this area in the front to put 30 students in. It's not a need for us, it's a need for our students and your kids and our community members. That's a student need. And our outdoor space, we need larger fields. The center of the field out there is not big enough at all times. Sometimes we need to move some of our activities over onto the lawn space on the west side of the science wing because there's not enough room. There's physically not enough room to keep our students safe on the field, so we move some activities so that we have plenty of space. Safety is our big concern. So we'd like more space in the gyms, more space for cardio equipment, more space for kids to be active and stay active. We'd also like, thank you. We'd also like our own space. It's tough saying, hey, can I use your room for first period and switching rooms all day to teach 6, 7 classes of health. We don't have a space to ourselves all day where we can set up. We need to jump from room to room to room, and I think that takes away from our kids. Do we make it work? Absolutely. Absolutely. But it would be nice to have our own personal space to do the best quality job we could. And we'd like a health room attached to one of our spaces so that when we need to utilize it, we can.
All right. And then the other day, here they are out on the lawn, a little croquet and golf. All right. So in the interest of time, I'm going to the committee has this in their handouts, but I want to quickly for the community go through this. Our CAD shop program right now, we have a computer lab, a wood shop, and a clean room where we teach traditional wood shop and computer-aided design. It also does double as a science room. And Simatech it's the new way of thinking about industrial arts. It's no longer sufficient for kids to just know how to work with wood. We want to move to a place where we can integrate the science, the math, and the technology to help them develop some foundational skills that they can take for science, technology, engineering, math in high school and beyond. So that would be something over the course of our dream of what we could offer kids in our programming. We have the skills, we just don't have the setup for it. Flexible spaces. We don't have flexible spaces. A lot of times you'll see kids working in hallways in small groups, but education requires interaction, and that sometimes means interaction with small groups of kids. It sometimes means interactions with adults in small groups of kids, and we don't have spaces to put them right now. And so being able to create spaces that would allow for small groups, for breakout lessons, for technology hubs. One of the things that we've added this year is a hub of 6 computers in the back there, which allows kids to be able to come into the library at any time and access their accounts and be able to use that. And that's something that should be available in more places for kids who are coming with their thumb drives. They're saving their work at home, sending it to their school, and being able to access that. So that's pretty critical. And then flexible spaces for staff. It's another thing that right now it just doesn't exist. But as we work towards becoming a more collaborative community of learners and as educators, we need that space. So here's some of our flexible spaces. Mary Emmons teaching a reading lesson out in the hall. Students spread out on the back floor to be able to work on their maps. Kids, and this is just so middle school, sitting in the hall, doing their little thing on their clipboard. They just can find the little cubbies all over the place to sit and work. But having space that we could designate for that would be would enhance our ability to provide great education. Technology, we have 2 wireless spots in the building. I just learned of the second one just the other day. We have 3 computer labs. One in the back here is a thin client lab, and it is brand new this year, purchased by funds from the Ellensburg Education Foundation. Great technology. The lab is 3 seminar rooms that have been divided up into a lab, so it's a little awkward to teach in there, and right now we're doing our state testing online, which has a lot of kids in that small space. We have one lab that's 2 years old, and then one that we'll just refer to as a cast-off. It's when a teacher gets a new computer or when we replace the computer lab. Anything that's viable, Mr. Blazina is able to resurrect and use in his classroom. And then we added the 6-station hub. In a perfect world, I'd love to be able to see us have wireless throughout our building. There's movement towards having every school be ready for what's called bring your own device. Kids have better equipment at home and want to be able to use that here as a part of their education, and we don't have the wireless to be able to support that. Having 3 labs that were consistent so that classrooms could go in and out of labs and not have to adjust the nuances of the computers. Having multiple state hubs, and then in a perfect world, mobile notebook labs or tablets that kids could actually use that wireless and we could make use of that. Currently for our outdoor space, we have parking in 2 lots, and the city fortunately allows us to use their lot across the Capitol. Our drop-off and pickup is street side. You saw the double parking and the buses on the street there. We don't have space for traditional sports. Many of our outdoor sports travel for practices, which adds to their afternoon. And then certainly limited outdoor space for students. We have a table, and a lot of times if you drive by at lunchtime, you'll see kids. I don't know why it's fun, but they grab hold of the flagpole and they just start walking, and it's their version of a jungle gym in middle school. So we do need sufficient parking. So for our visitors and for events, we do need to have safe drop-off and pick-up places for both. You saw 54% of our kids are being dropped off every morning, and without a designated space, just stopping on the street makes it really challenging to keep them safe. And then in that idea of having that common space, having a courtyard type situation where kids could be, and we have beautiful weather here, for them to be outside and enjoy that. The thing about education, thriving now and in the future requires becoming a lifelong learner and demands more than a basic understanding of reading, writing, and math. Our kids deserve nothing less. They deserve to have every chance at success in life. They deserve to have a strong foundation, and we do a pretty amazing job with our situation that we're faced in, and we're facing additional challenges, and we know that. But what we know we could do is amazing, and we want that for your kids, your grandkids, your nieces and nephews. We want that for the future at Ellensburg. So.
Well said.
So again, the presentation ended up being longer than Michelle anticipated, I think. But that's normal, right? But so folks from the community, if you do have questions, maybe you could write those down, and a way to get back in touch with you and your name on it, and hopefully make sure it's legible. We're not going to have time, obviously, to have questions from the audience. Are there members of the committee who have questions for the Morgan Middle School staff? Sue?
Yes, I'd like to ask all of you if you think that the flex space, the additional flexible space that you could do pull-outs, etc., would you prefer to have one larger space located somewhere in the building, or multiple, perhaps smaller spaces in different areas?
Sue asked me that question earlier, and I couldn't answer it. I think personally, I guess I would prefer multiple smaller spaces, but I can't speak for the whole staff.
Yeah, I was going to say I don't have anything to compare to.
Because you don't have anything.
Yeah, show me what other opportunities there are at other buildings and what they use them for, and I'll tell you, and I'll give you the answer to that.
Well,
Otherwise, I don't know.
Okay, and what I kind of heard is when, talking about small group work or, project work or perhaps bringing two classes together, it sort of implied this could be happening in multiple locations, but not necessarily bringing 100 kids together or 60 kids, together.
I think that one of the things that we hope for in our opportunities to provide great education is having all of those things. If you look, a lot of current elementary schools have pod style where the classrooms open up into a common area, which allows some flexibility there. There's times when their cafeteria is used by all of the sixth grade block classes at once, but then at the same time, a small group of science students might need to get together and work on a project. So I think the answer is probably both.
Okay.
That's fair.
When the high school was built, did the academic scores go up, or did they go down in the last 5 years?
I can't
in the
speak to
school?
that.
Mr. Ferris can probably answer that.
Well, let's put it this way, to be in the top 10% of the high school seniors, if you had a B and 2 A minuses, you didn't make the top 10%. What we see at our high school is that our top 10%, when you look at it, at least last year, when they did the top 10% of the state, approximately 30% of our students were in the top 10% of the state, even though they couldn't make the top 10% for high school. Over 5 years ago, we're about $1 million in academic scholarships. Last year, it topped 1.5 million. It should go way above that this year. We also know that our students have to perform better because they have end-of-course requirements.
Right. In the testing
And one of the
scores?
things we've also seen is that our SAT scores have gone up, which is a national deal. Our AP program has increased. Our honors program has increased. 5 years ago, we had 5 students in algebra in 8th grade. This year we have over 100. So we're seeing some very significant changes in our academic program.
So Doug, did you have a follow-up question?
Well, I was just wondering, as
And
far
one of
as...
the key things about the high school is probably well, it's when you talk about safety, and that's kind of what I was getting at. When I was building principal at the old school, I averaged fights about 17 to 22 fights a year that I would have to, that kids would be involved. Since the high school has been built, I think we've had 7 total, which is amazing.
Is that because the kids are fighting less, or just they think safer?
All
And as far as the state's testing scores, I know you gave me this, percentages on all of that. The state's testing scores, is the
well, I
the
could
high
go
school-
on for my
Just the yes or
dissertation.
no would be great.
My dissertation was essentially on the federal No Child Left Behind, which by
I was
the year
referring to the
2000,
state.
by the year 2014, they've said that we're supposed to do all that 100% with regards to the state test. And what we've seen is that about 190 school districts in the state out of the 200 or so have to identify themselves as failing schools because of the requirements of No Child Left Behind. So it's really, as far as I'm concerned, not a very good measure.
Okay,
It's
so
one snapshot of the total picture of what our students do.
Correct, but on the other hand, that might be your idea of a snapshot, and that's why I rely, you rely on a lot of the state and federal percentages, but as far as the state, we're not doing as well as we were 5 years ago on that. One of the, you can argue back and forth as whether it's because that we want kids to get more A's so we can look better, but when it comes down to it, if they're taught the same tests on a state level and they've done worse, then which monitor do you use?
Can I
So
respond to that
that's-
real quick?
But
Just to
okay,
say,
but I guess it's a question that doesn't really have to do with the facility thing, so I really want to
It had to do
go
with
back to that.
it had to do with the presentation of a better school with all of these functions bring upon better grades, and that's what the
Okay,
perspective
and
was.
I don't want to misrepresent what we are trying to share though, and say that it's about grades. I want to be very clear to everybody that our goal is to provide great education, which is measured in lots of different ways.
Right. Jim?
By the way, it does have a lot to do with feel good though, but when you come in retention, et cetera, keeping coming. I have a question generally. You know, I looked at your handout, and this is rough. I came up with the needs that would be approximately between more space, between 14 and 16 more classrooms. Trying to figure this out completely. It might be between 12 and 18. A large gym or area, a second place, specialized areas, and then these non-instructional rooms, let alone outside field experience. Maybe this is better for the architects, so I yield on that, but I guess it strikes me about, you know, locations, modernizing this building or a larger space. You base this on FTE now and what will grow?
That document that you have was what I sent to ALSC Architects in January of last year, when we were talking about what would the needs be for a 900 student population. And so what I added, the piece that I added to that document before I sent it to you was an explanation that, and I don't know how much we want to get into the math of this, but right now we operate on a 7-period day, which means teachers teach 6 class periods and students attend 7. They get their prep. Teachers get their prep. One thing that we have no flexibility about is that if we were to choose that, if we were to say we believe that going to 6-period days where it's 10 minutes longer per class and teachers teach 5, that means you have to add additional staff, and we don't have the physical space for that. So I put a qualifier on there saying, yes, this was for 900 students, but if we were to do anything different in our programming, we wouldn't have the space for it right now. So that's
what. Thank you.
Any questions from the committee for the staff of Morgan before we transition?
I had a question about the facilities operations, your maintenance. What kind of, we saw the structure and things. What kind of program are they? I mean, do they have? Are we looking at old boilers, new boilers?
We didn't get a chance to go down into the boiler room. It is an old boiler down there, and I'd be happy to take anyone down if you want to stop by school someday. We can walk down and see that. It is an old boiler down there that heats the building. In terms of
what kind of how much of their time is spent in repairing versus
I don't have exact numbers on that. I know that my custodial staff spends a great deal of time fixing things, tiles falling, those kinds of things. I don't have exact percentages. I know that they sure are busy. And in the summer, then it has lent towards, they've got that kind of maintenance to do on the building rather than maybe updating paint or something like that. So they're doing the maintenance on the structure and on that sort of thing. I can certainly ask my head custodian to kind of do a breakdown. That would be helpful. You bet.
Chris, looks like you posed for a question there.
Well, I am cogitating on the fact that if you add all of these numbers up, you come up to a building which is much larger than anyone can reasonably expect to get. And I'm thinking, is there a way to have priorities on these things? And how do we determine if Morgan Middle School could, even with a remodel, meet those priorities for space? Because this is a small, comparatively small area, and without having some idea of what the priorities are, difficult to even assimilate, at least for me, what's required. It seems to me that we almost have to make the decision of, do we want to, our son, do we want to try and wrestle with making this space, if it's fully utilized, a possibility, or should we be focusing on, let's say, the Valley View area, and what could we fit these things there with a new building? I mean, aside from the cost, the space is a big factor, at least from my point of view.
I would say I'm pretty glad I'm not on this committee having to wrestle with that, because I think that is a huge challenge. You know, in terms of prioritizing, some of the things that we listed as needs or anticipated needs, we could easily say are current needs, and so I think there's an issue with that. For the purpose of this presentation, I don't think any of us were thinking in terms of trying to figure out what we would want first or what's most important, but rather, here's the program that we offer, and in order to offer that to either more students or in a different way, this is that's what would be needed. I would hope that should a bond be run and pass, that then the educational specifications process would help us prioritize that.
In order for, at least for me to push for a bond, I want to know where that money's going to go, what it's going to be used for, and am I going to get a return on that investment?
But Fritz, this is kind of what's in here. These are the aspects that they put forth. They're saying this is what we need. Unless I misread it. Right?
I guess I'm sort of curious, Fritz, what you think in this is extravagant, or what you think people are.
Well, I haven't analyzed it fully, but if you add up all of the things which are required, you come up with a fairly large number of square feet required. And what I'm wondering, is there enough square feet on the property here to meet those needs? Fundamentally, that.
Well, what we saw was 110,000 current versus 126,000 desired. So it's about 16,000 square feet. Is that extravagant?
Well, I think what Fritz is saying is that how do you fit in all those additional requested spaces, additional gym, classrooms, et cetera, in the equivalent of 16,000 additional square feet.
And have classrooms which are large enough to be flexible. We're going to have fewer teachers. We don't have a big business space here. What can we afford, really, is the question.
And I think maybe for now that's a question I just have to hang on to and not get answers to.
You asked me a question, I was thinking.
I know, I could see. That's right. Okay, that's my fault. Okay, so what we want to do then is wrap up the presentation from Ellensburg School District staff. And thank you all very much. Very informative and very helpful.
Do you guys have any?
So if you have questions for the Morgan Middle School staff from the community members, if you could pass them to the center of the aisle. After I introduce the next speaker, I will come and collect those, and we'll make sure you get answers to those questions. Okay, so Bill Grubich from Hill International is going to come up and introduce kind of the next two phases of the presentation.
Where did she set that up?
Before I get started, I want to take back just about a year and a half, just to give you some background so that I can make sure that everybody on the committee is aware of why these two gentlemen or why these three gentlemen, actually, the two architectural firms are in the room. If you go back to September, October 2010, you're sitting in my office, I get a call from the school district, and the call is, we need your help to facilitate hiring an architect. Hiring an architect to help us move into the next bond campaign. I think the district at that time understood that they needed to put more definition into what was needed in terms of a middle school. And so obviously, because I've been consulting with the district since 2000, the answer was yes. I mean, I love Helensburgh. I love working with this district. I love working with this community. You've been really good to me and my staff over the last 12 years. But the call was a no-brainer, really. It was to facilitate it was to provide a service that my firm provides all the time. It was to take the district through the state-mandated process to hire an architect. You see, the school district in the state just can't go out and look in the phone book and hire any architect. They have to go through a process. The process basically is a qualifications-driven process, not price-driven. It's not the lowest bidder. It's the best qualified with the firm that has the most experience. And so we advertised, and I think we got 13, 14 proposals. And so a committee was put together. There were a variety of people, not all school district people on the committee. Michelle's the only one I remember that was on the committee, and being the middle school principal, it made perfect sense that she was on that committee. And so we evaluated the proposals. We shortlisted, and right over there in the corner of this library, on a Saturday morning, we interviewed 3 firms, and that committee selected ALSE Architects from Spokane, Washington, as the firm that they wanted to move forward with to try to prepare enough information so that we could pass a bond in February of 11. And so that's how ALSE got to the room. Several months ago, it seems like just a couple weeks ago, Doug, but several months ago, the Modernize Our Morgan group, trying to gather better information, trying to understand the picture, they went out and they found this character. And a lot of you guys in here already know Lauren because he's already presented to you, but they found the city architects who has a really good practice in doing upgrades of facilities, modernizations, and in many cases, historic upgrades. And so they went out and they found the firm that they felt could take the existing Morgan facility and modernize it to meet the needs of the community. So those 2 firms that's why they're in the room. Now, again, several months ago, the Bassetti Group, and it's lovingly become known as the Bassetti Report, was commissioned, and Lauren and his team basically went in and they looked at the basic criteria that was presented as to the needs of the Morgan Middle School. They then took the existing facility and they looked at it from the perspective of, can we rebuild it? You know, can it serve the needs? Can it deal with those issues that you were just asking about? And so tonight we're going to show you those 2 elements. Lauren's going to present what the concept for the modernized Morgan facility. He's going to show you how the space can be used. He's going to give you an explanation of the cost associated, the estimated cost. Now please remember that word, estimated. We're in, what is today? We're in May of 2012, and at best, we would be building this school in 2014. So think about the word estimated when we talk about cost tonight, because gas wasn't $4.04 3 months ago, was it? And what's it going to be 6 months from now? So again, estimated cost is what Lauren's going to share with you, and then Steve and Ken are going to share the same basic information as it relates to a new building at a different site. When they're done with their presentation, I want you to really pay attention to them, but don't get too excited if you kind of drift, because when they're done, I'm going to summarize the issues for you. I'm going to summarize it from the like issues in the two concepts, and I'm going to summarize it from the difference in the 2 concepts. So I'm going to give you a list. It's going to make it real easy for you when it's all over. And it's not a list I developed. It's a list that we developed. We met in Spokane in my office last week, and we agreed on this list. So it's not a debatable issue. It's a collaboration, trying to get on the same page so that you, the committee, can have a good understanding of what the good, the bad, and the ugly are of either modernizing Morgan or of building a new facility. I then, at the end of all of that summarization, I'll give you another little primer in soft versus hard costs. Because you're going to learn as you listen to these 2 presentations, that's a place where there's still some difference, where we're not fully reconciled. And the reason I'm going to spend some time in trying to help you better understand that concept is because it's a significant number. You know, it's got more than one zero after it. It's a number that I think you have to understand. Okay, so that's what we're going to do for about the next 45 minutes or so. You want to start it? Sure.
Can we turn this document cam off?
Turn it off?
Yeah. I thought we were doing.
Who knows
big
document
board,
cam?
So that's what I brought.
There we go.
Take care of that problem.
That's your projector.
I bet you can unplug the whole thing.
I said I could build you a school. I didn't say. Use it up.
Sorry for the setup delay, but I thought we were going big board tonight, so that's what I brought.
Would you like some help?
Sure, if you want to toss one up, that would be great. Reasonably straight. Here, I think you're going to be listening.
Did you guys give it up here?
You still need it? Oh, okay, then I won't need it. I was gonna get it out of the way.
Are these reasonably straight for everyone? It's hard to get the perspective.
You're losing one.
Uh-oh. Dipping. Too much weight on that.
Nice one.
Yell if it starts to slip. Is it going again? We'll pray on that one. Good evening. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Lauren McConaughey. I'm with the City Architects. As Bill just touched on, I wanted to go through a quick overview of the report that we prepared for the Modernize Our Morgan Committee. An overview of Morgan in terms of a walkthrough with engineers, architects, cost estimators, and a quick look at some of the commonalities and differences between the idea of a new construction versus restoration of the old building. I got a call November 11th by Robert Walker asking if we would look at Morgan Middle School. Hi, Robert. The question was, is this old school able to be transformed into a 21st century learning environment, and can it be safe for kids? And then the follow-on question was, how much money would that cost? We have had, as Bill touched on, a fair experience in modernizing old schools, particularly lovely old landmarks. And I brought a board that touched on that with some relevant examples, and this is a little handout for the committee, just touching on some school designs, but particularly some historic schools. I brought 3 examples on this large board. You may recognize one of these from the movies. 10 Things I Hate About You, I think, was filmed at Stadium High School in Tacoma. This is an image of Roosevelt High School in Seattle, and this is an image of Madison Middle School, also in Seattle. These 2 buildings were designed by Floyd Naramore. He's the designer of the original building at Morgan. So there's a lot of commonality in terms of the way these structures are put together and the way he was thinking about school buildings in the 1920s. Both Roosevelt and Stadium had major additions that needed to be torn down in terms of getting hold of the old structure and rebuilding that. Madison Middle School, a collegiate Gothic building, was reshaped into a grade-based team supporting middle school education, and we just got a great overview of some of those challenges that go into educating middle school students. So I'll refer to these occasionally as I go through Morgan, just as examples of what can be done.
So we came in January of 2012 with structural, mechanical, electrical engineers, a couple of architects, myself and one of my senior project managers, and a cost estimator to walk through the school. Michelle graciously showed us around. We were with a couple of maintenance folks. The press was there in spades, so there was good coverage. We were able to visit most all spaces in the school, crawled up in the attic and took a pretty close look at it, and then ultimately went back and prepared a report. And I hope the committee has had the opportunity to get a handle on this. I know I forwarded a copy to Farley just the other day. He said he hadn't had a copy. I do believe it's now available at the district if that's desirable. And within this report was basically an analysis of the existing building and a conceptual design, I stress the word conceptual, of could we change it, could we upgrade? I guess the simple answer to can Old Morgan Middle School be a 21st century learning environment is absolutely yes, very straightforward. Following discussion with Modernize Our Morgan, I'm going to refer to them as MOM just because I like the acronym and it's kind of clever. We developed in this report two primary options. One at 109,000 square feet targeting 720 students, the other at about 124,000 square feet targeting 900 students. And I'm sure you all know about the debate of how big should this all be. That's not for me to worry about tonight. I'm going to try to talk about the school. Within those two primary options were some other subsets. We looked at very basic finishes and what we called moderate finishes. We took a look at the new high school and said, okay, how is this building finished out? We need to make sure that the durability and quality of materials and finishes met what had been built in the community previously. So those were the options. That being said, we also understood that there had been some failed bonds and cost might be a critical factor in how we understand that, so we looked at a very basic one. So in essence, there were four original options shown, two small, one at low cost, medium cost, two large, one at low cost, medium cost. When we gave the draft report to the MOM group, a diverse group of citizens from what I understand, they asked about an option, a third option. The third option looked at keeping all of the structures on this site. I'm going to get into our conceptual design in a moment, which demolished the 60s and 90s buildings on this site. The third option then looked at, should we keep those and what would a middle school look like there? We, as the architectural group, did not recommend that third option for a couple of reasons. One, didn't support some of the things we heard from Michelle about professional learning communities, the importance of the sixth grade team, ideas about where is education going in the future, and also, quite frankly, these are rather dreadful additions in terms of respecting the landmark character of the old building and have taken away presence from within the community. That's my bias, and I'll own up to that. So what I wanted to touch on is the existing building, first of all. Here is a colored up plan. The upper level of this diagram is a plan of the existing building. You can see in red here the original Floyd Naramore structure, 1929, classroom wing, the theater or auditorium, and the boiler room, for example, up here, still pumping away. 1935 addition, also by Naramore, off to the south, with a gymnasium and some of the locker rooms, also in the light, the spring green color. Some 1953 edition in the orange here. This was also a 53 edition. I understand it was modernized in the 90s. Major edition in 66, and the last edition in 94. As we walked through this building, again, structural, mechanical, electrical engineers, it was pretty clear right out of the gates that the building finishes, systems were shot. this is not a salvageable mechanical system. The electrical system, we'd be working really hard to try and work around the ancient wiring. The architectural finishes, they're worn out. I mean, a number of us just walked through the school again this evening, and the stories I heard from staff and the people I was chatting with, it's a worn out building. It needs some help. However, the skin, the shell of this building is a fine building. It's in very good shape. Walk around the exterior of this building. Try to scrape a little mortar out of some bricks. It's hard as a rock. You're graced with climate in Ellensburg that we don't get in the Puget Sound area. We get a lot of moisture into our building, and there's degradation in terms of the exterior shell. But the exterior shell of Morgan is in good shape. Now, that's not to say that it meets code. And obviously, school boards struggle mightily with safety and critical issues for children. This building doesn't meet code in terms of seismic issues, life safety, fire issues, ADA, which is Americans with Disability Act. The energy code is woefully lacking. I think we've heard several reports about massive expenditures just to heat the thing. Mechanical, electrical systems are shot. But again, that shell, the old bones of this building are fine. And I would again point you to an 1890 building, an 1822 building, and 1922 and 1929, if I'm remembering correctly, as being perfectly fine old structures that just needed some help. So what this report does is look at, okay, how can we take on this old building? So I guess I like to use the phrase X-ray eyes. When I look at buildings like this, I don't look at that lousy finish and that fired up mechanical system that's heating everything and you got to open windows to cool it down. Those don't work anymore. But if we see through the finishes and understand the structure, then we can get a hold of that structure, bring it up to seismic safety, bring it up to good exiting codes, good fire codes, good new mechanical systems, electrical systems, energy wrap the building so it's not leaking like a sieve, and we got a fine building that rise again. And again, there are many examples of these things that are happening. So, as we began, and I think I'm tilting again here, all right. This is the problem one, and it's the main thing I got to talk to. If it starts leaning, throw something. So we came up with a concept for the building that said, how can we both preserve the rich heritage of this historic structure while simultaneously embracing 21st century learning and teaching? So one of the first things that was very clear is this is a very tight site. It's the one-story additions in front of the old three-story building are just gumming up the site. And so what I'd like to do is first of all touch on some of the ideas that we had. Now, while I'm doing this, I should be careful to point out we did not have a program for this building. What we did is we based the conceptual design on programs that we had done for middle schools previously. I subsequently learned about some of the spatial layouts when we got some cost estimates. So, you know, the good news is when we took this on, it was we came up with about 124,000 square feet in the report. Turned out that the new school was being planned for 126,000 square feet, so we were in the ballpark. Again, these are based on conceptual ideas, a walkthrough, and some best practices, if you will, that we know about in middle school education. Again, these align so you can see the original historic building here. The dotted areas are the 60s and 90s edition. One of the first things we thought about was, and we heard it loud and clear tonight, is this is a tight site. We need more playgrounds. We need a place for kids to be outdoors. We need a proper entry to the building. So, and I might mention that we have in other buildings torn down more modern additions to buildings in order to capture the frame of that lovely historic structure and rebuild around that in a more, what I think is appropriate or desirable manner. So that's what we're looking at here at Morgan, to tear down the 60s edition, the blue portion, and the yellow portion. Now, I know that's a bit counterintuitive because those are the more modern pieces, but the question becomes, do they support 21st century learning, in which we look at professional learning communities and kids in smaller groupings, much more personalized education, the kind of flex areas that got talked about. And I'll touch on some of that in a minute. So first step was to think about opening up the site. And an addition, which you see here, and I've subsequently thought of it a little further north, but that's an aside, you can't help keep the design process going, would be 2 or 3 stories depending on the ultimate size of the school. If it was a 700, 750 student school, this might be a 2-story addition. If it's a 900 student school, as anticipated in the new school, this would be a 3-story addition. And that addition would sit in here. Some other aspects of this site that I thought were important, more play fields. First of all, we recognized that the tennis courts were completely shot. We were told that we needed tennis courts, and they happened to fit in the field. We created this is a football field. This is not a full quarter-mile track, but it is a track. There's a track out there that I'm not sure. Maybe someone knows how big, what's the distance around that track, but I doubt if it's a quarter mile.
Just short of quarter mile.
Okay. But by demolishing some of these additions, we were able to create a new play field over in the, southeast corner of the site. Additional things that were important was a proper entry off the street. Right now, there's sort of an asphalt paved area that I know I didn't find the entry when I first came here. A student plaza that is facing south and is sort of welcoming the sun. We even showed a terrace area where indoor-outdoor kind of activities could occur if that was a desirable aspect of how teaching could occur. You'll also notice a note on this drawing that says a rain garden. Rain gardens are ways in which we take storm water running off the roof or onto the site and gather it in order to detain it before it goes into storm drains, so we don't flood this basic storm drain system of the city, but also potentially allow that to find its way back into the aquifer beneath our school. So the question becomes, how do we teach our children about sustainable practices as we move forward in creating a school for them? And that's right next to the student plaza. I should also mention, this has been very well said, this is a tight site. We have designed on smaller sites. I remember one that was a little less than 3 acres that we were working on. Roosevelt High School is a 10-acre site in Seattle. I can't remember stadium, but it's very small. It's doable, and yes, somebody mentioned New York City. These are more urban notions, but it's a workable approach. In terms of auto drop-off and bus drop-off, we assumed that we would simply keep existing systems. Now, I heard subsequently tonight that there were some challenges with safety in terms of bus drop-off and auto drop-off. So it sounds as if there needs to be a better management plan in terms of the care of where buses occur, the care of the direction of where pickup and drop-off of kids from cars occur. But again, this is conceptual. We knew some of the problems, we didn't know all of them. So by realigning this historic plan, our thought was we could bring it into 21st century needs, meet new systems, make it a code legal building. I might mention the code. We operate under what's called the Uniform Building Code right now. For existing buildings, there's something called the ASCE Standard 3103. ASCE is American Society of Civil Engineers. This is a code that deals specifically with old buildings because the systems that they used in making these structures aren't the same systems that the new Uniform Building Code works with, so we needed a mechanism by which to judge was this a safe structure, a safe building moving forward. What we found when we, and maybe I'll jump into the new floor plan now. Is this visible from everyone? I know this is the tilting drawing. First issue was, here's the existing building, or the historic building in this area. New addition for an administration, perhaps even an entry porch welcoming people into the school. Admin becomes a place to view out to the street, who's coming into our school, and into the center of the school, a welcoming place upon entry. A new wing, be it 2 or 3 stories, excuse me, I think I'm getting in the way here, 2 or 3 stories off to the east, and really looking at the arrangement of the old Morgan as another wing of classrooms or student amenities. The theater area, and I've subsequently learned a lot about the theater in this community. I know that it's very important performance space and within the larger community. We've heard some tonight about how important it is in terms of the working of the middle school. We had a concept here which left some, our first notion was, hearing that it was important as a historic space in the community, is how can we restore this space but reshape the use of it. One of the examples I brought along tonight was, this is Roosevelt High School, the old theater in Roosevelt. This has been adaptively reused into the library in the center of the school. And here it is in plan. This is a little plan with classrooms all around it. Now, I'm not suggesting that the Morgan Theater becomes a library, but what I am trying to point out is, here's the old proscenium arch. We actually did scrape tests to learn the original colors that the room was painted. It's a wonderful space. It's the center of this school. And I think if we look creatively at how some of these lovely old rooms can be shaped, they can be pretty rich spaces that kids love and support education. So the idea in terms of reshaping the old theater was to say the sloped floor, the fixed seats are limiting. Somebody made a great point that when you have a space, this big space in the middle of our school that we don't get to use on a regular daily basis, it's a big giveaway. So is there a way to keep the room, keep the presence of that room, that historic presence, but adaptively reuse the space to become a lunchroom, a commons, perhaps some fixed seating that is the front of that stage. One of the issues we worry about for middle schoolers and elementary school, actually all K-12 kids, is in a performance mode, speaking to a 700-seat auditorium for a young voice is a huge challenge. There are not great acoustics in that space. It needs to be reshaped and understood. So this became, the front of the space became a smaller venue supporting the needs of middle school age kids, either in small performance, perhaps to classmates, a one-act, whatever, perhaps the jazz band, and then open up to a larger commons for the bigger community-oriented presentations. What that looks like, we don't know. This is a concept design. That's as far as we've got. We then looked at some of the program issues that we garnered from the cost estimate for the new school. The new school shows 27 classrooms. This plan shows 23 classrooms plus 4 special ed, 27 classrooms. I'm sorry, the new showed 23 classrooms plus 4 special ed. This showed 27 classrooms. And you can see the classrooms are basically oriented in the wings. Here's the second floor. The library and the admin serve as the cornering element that are supervisable, gathering spaces for students. These wings, be it the old original Narramore building or a new addition, become small learning communities or professional learning communities. Places, remember when we looked at the schedule of where kids go on a daily basis, they spent 3 of their classes in a block schedule. This would actually allow a whole host of classes to be worked on in a block schedule mode or a small learning community. We also, and this was just a lucky shot, I guess, we also showed a flex area within each of these learning communities, recognizing that as we look toward 21st century learning, it's blended. It's about small group work, large group work, personal work, computer-based learning, book-based learning, blending of many learning approaches, trying to reach the specific learning styles of our children. So these become small learning communities or professional learning communities. They clusters, pods, they go by many names, but it allows a more personalized education and a focus within the day's trip of a student moving through the school. So other comparisons that we subsequently looked at, The new looked at 3 tech and art spaces. This also had 3 tech and art spaces, 1 library, 2 music spaces. I might mention that when we walked into the music area, I was bombarded with energy of the band, and I recognized this is too small a space. So what we actually did is expanded that in subsequent models and added a Voc Tech area out here, just because we were concerned music teachers go deaf when their spaces are too small, and we need to be cognizant of safety issues for staff as well as students. The new school showed a Voc lab plus a classroom. We showed a large Voc lab, and I apologize, this drawing doesn't show it, but it's the covered area out on the west side. The gym. Oh, I'm sorry, east side. I'm upside down. The gym idea, there is difference between the gym that was thought about in the new and the gym here. Our thought, again, was we own this structure. It's a perfectly good gymnasium structure, but it has these built-in bleachers that are both lovely and completely in the way of the functional nature of that space. So by removing the bleachers and basically grabbing the whole room of that gymnasium, you could very comfortably fit 2 cross courts or a main basketball court kind of space. We also showed some new locker rooms, a fitness room, a PE storage. What we missed, and would obviously be a question mark as we would, if this was to move forward, would be the auxiliary gym, and the wrestling room. So we showed flex areas scattered around the varying floors. The new diagram, or the new plan, shows expanded PE spaces. I don't know what the right answer is. That's a community question. So this was the diagram that we developed in terms of how might we save Old Morgan and make it into a 21st century learning community. In terms of some of the estimating for this, our original estimate for the study was about $44.8 million. That's escalated to 2014. Our understanding of the new school program, it was roughly 49.9, escalated to the same notion. When actually Robert and I talked about the reconciliation issue, and one of the concerns was, are there clear scope changes that have been made in terms of reconciling the sizes? Again, we didn't have the program. We were taking a leap at a new learning community in Old Morgan. So in discussions with Robert, what I promised to do was to share changes that were specific scope changes versus just upgrades in soft costs. And I know Bill's going to talk about some soft costs. First of all, we added a couple thousand square feet, so this was not 124, but 126,000 square feet. We also looked at phasing. When we first did this sketch, we had thought that the whole school was being abandoned. We've subsequently learned that the 8th grade is moving out and the 6th and 7th grade will stay. That would require the kids to stay in the newer additions while the older building was being phased in terms of construction. There were some revised site costs once we understood some of the expenditures and targeted prices of the new work, and also some revised off-site costs. All told, those scope changes for hard costs, these are costs of building, were roughly $182,000. Another critical scope difference when we looked at the new estimate compared to the one we had prepared for the restoration was in what we call FF&E. That stands for fixtures, furniture, and equipment. It's the stuff in the school. The anticipated FF&E was a full replacement. We had taken a crack at about 50% replacement. So we added an additional 3% factor to the FF&E, which was about $890,000, for a total scope change of about 1.076 million. Sorry. The non-scope changes, which are things, and Bill, I know is going to touch on soft costs, which have to do with fees and improvements and how much you pay your manager and your architects and your engineers. Those came to about $280,000. So again, in terms of the reconciled estimate, We now saw the new Morgan around 46.1, the restored Morgan around 46.1, and the new Morgan around 49.9 again. We had a meeting just last week looking at some of the common characteristics. 21st century learning environment, 126,000 square feet, 900 kids, very similar programs, very similar finishes in terms of the character of the durability of the building. I personally think you got another 80 or 100 years in the old shell of this building. This isn't simply a 30-year building. It's built for a long time. Both concepts are fully escalated to 2014. State match, I understand, is the same for either new or remodeled. Full code compliance in terms of mechanical, electrical, seismic, life safety systems. This could be a safe building for kids. New mechanical, electrical, and a new technical infrastructure. The digital capabilities of the old building, as we heard on the tour, are sadly lacking. Some of the differences, the PE, we mentioned that in terms of where should the space go? Is it in some of these breakout flex areas? Is it in a wrestling room, an auxiliary gym? These are ed spec kinds of questions that are critical answers. Bus auto, there is not room. Well, I would argue it would be a curious expenditure to take part of this site and bring buses onto the site as part of the drop-off and pickup. You have public streets. Perhaps it's an issue of management of that process. Sports fields, clearly if the new building's built near the high school or outside of town, there's the potential of more fields. I mean, this is the site that we have. Part of our logic was to create more vertical buildings to open up the site for an extra play field and the kind of tennis courts that we showed. Access to out-of-school programs, something the superintendent brought to the fore. Near the new high school, there's access to high school programs. Here in the center of town, there's access to the community, downtown businesses, library. I think there's a teen center close by as well. Another critical issue was roofing. New schools typically have sloped roofs. They drain better, less maintenance. My understanding is Old Morgan has pretty much of a flat roof. We would not be putting flat roofing on. We would be putting low slope, single ply membrane roofing, similar kinds of maintenance cycles to what you might find on a shingle roof or something of that nature. Phasing, the new school could be built all at once if it's on a raw site and doesn't have a building there. This would take 2 or 3 phases. There's no question about that. On-house educational programs, one of the things that we learned subsequently was some of the 60s and 90s additions, the district had thought if the Old Morgan is torn down, these would be kept and used for some on-house programs. That simply wasn't part of the concept as we began working on it, so the Restoration Morgan would not have those kinds of spaces. Cost, I think I touched on about a $3.7 million delta between restoring the old as the lesser cost. Some of the non-programmatic differences, transportation costs. It was interesting to see how many kids are walking and biking to work, to school. I can't speak to that. I think it's a critical function in terms of how costs are spent within the district. All kids would obviously have to be bused or driven to a school on the outer edge of town. Hopefully more could walk and bicycle if it was in town. I know emergency services are going to be closer in terms of fire, ambulance, police in town. Then these get into sort of squishy areas, and they become very much about community, what importance community puts on such things as the school is the center of community. If it's on the edge of town, it's tough to be a center. If it's in the town, it's probably a little easier. Sustainability issues. Both schools would be required to meet the Washington Sustainable Schools Protocol. It's part of what all Washington schools do. There is an important study that looks at restoring old buildings is actually more sustainable. It often takes up to 80 years to pay for the energy efficiency to balance out between old and new. These are community issues, though. And the final one would be historic preservation. What's the importance of this old school, if it's brought back to be actually visible to this community? And I think that's a critical question. So with that, I'll stand down.
So it's now 8:30. I just want to remind the committee that you all made a commitment to be here from 6:30 to 8:30. We still have one full presentation and then the summary from Hill International. I hope your patience is hanging in there. We knew it was going to be a long night when we agreed last time to have 3 different presentations. Hope you're doing okay. It is hot in here, and I'm guessing that's probably just because of the space is having too many bodies in it. Yep. Okay. All right.
Can I just, hey,
we have a 5-minute break.
I'll just leave your 2 easels up. We'll just use yours.
Oh, sure.
How about a 3-minute break?
Unless you're heading out.
Okay. Well, we're going to have questions at the very end.
Oh, yeah. Need more water or anything?
So 3-minute break.
Do you need anything?
No, I think we just go.
Yep. Florence, what is the total cost? What about after the 2 or 3 things? What my understanding is that Bill's got that,
What's that?
Okay, we're about at the end of our 3-minute break, so if we can come back to our spot, that'd be great.
Wait for our moderator to come back, or we start without it? She's coming back. Start without it? What time is it again? Start without it? Better. Oh, we can go to number 2. Good evening, I'm Ken Murphy with ALSD Architects. Steve Walter, also with ALSD Architects, will also present a little bit to you tonight. I'm going to be fairly brief and leave as much time as late as it is for questions. I think what I have to go over is fairly straightforward. Certainly with a new school, there's lots of opportunities how you might lay it out. It doesn't take quite as much testing and fitting and seeing on a remodel project to test and see if it would work. Steve Walter right now and I are working on a number of school projects. The 4 that I'm working on, 3 of the 4 are addition and remodel projects. One happens to be a brand new school, but in the schools that we do, which is quite a bit of our work, it probably varies from 50 to 70% of them are probably our additions and remodel projects. I recently worked on a project at Eastern Washington University. It was a historic 1923 building, very similar in a lot of the construction to Morgan. 3-story masonry building. It was actually designed as a dormitory building and had been used for a dormitory building, I'm not sure how many years. In the last 15, it had been used as a classroom building with very little remodel work. And our task was to add on to that building and to bring it up to university standards for the educational environment. So can it be done? Absolutely. Have we done it? Yes. Part of meeting a number of times with Lauren, this isn't about the Pacetti report or the ALC. This is about what's the best value for your community. So our goal, both Lauren's and our goal when we got together and Bill's, was that for a couple of different professionals to come together, we come to agreement that if you're going to remodel, this is reasonable, it could happen. There's some pros and cons, and we can talk more about that. There's a reasonable budget of what it's going to take, that we're both on board with that. If you do a new school, we're both on board really of what, the project costs, might be for that new school. I think some of Lauren's numbers for the new construction, which there's reasons for it, for new construction on the Morgan site were actually higher cost per square foot than some of our numbers. So it all gets back to just looking at the big picture of really what's the best value, and you guys need to determine for your community what is the best value. Lauren mentioned that the remodel study that he did is 46.1 compared to 49.9, so $3 million, almost $4 million difference. There are some things that in remodel, I think Lauren will support that there are some compromises that you sometimes have to make that a brand new site you might not have to do. It's not to say you couldn't have a 21st century educational environment, but some of those decisions will be a little bit different. That's not to say you shouldn't take that option. Like the idea for doing a 2-story addition or a 3-story addition on a tight site, you might have to make that decision day one. Are you building for 900 kids? Are you building for 800 kids? The idea of building 2 stories and coming back 5 years and building another story on top is possible, but certainly a lot more expensive than a site where you can do a wing and expand on the end of the wing. So this is some of the things you have to weigh as you go through and you look at what your opportunities are for this. Some of the things that I wanted to point out that are some differences, and I won't go over and repeat a lot of information because I think Lauren covered a lot of this quite well. But what this is showing is part of the Valley View site, taking advantage of some shared space, develop some additional playfield opportunities, how you might, and this is about a footprint of a middle school. There's a layout like that. There's a layout a number of different ways, certainly through the design process that we would test. I thought the staff did a really good job today, the first part of the meeting, probably the enjoyable part of the meeting, but really talking about what the needs are and the focus on the children. And really, you look at the process for either one of these ideas, a remodel or a new, we're at the very beginning of that process. And part of what we do is working with school districts, and Lauren does, is making sure that we understand enough about what those needs would be so that we appropriately establish a budget so that you can pass a bond and there can be commitment and from the community on supporting what those needs are and to meet those. And then just how there's a ton of details in design and working with staff, working with community to understand a lot more of the detail. But knowing the big picture of studying the cost and the ideas and testing in a number of different ways. We presented to the committee a couple different ways in which we come up with our costs. One was an area summary that we worked with Michelle on, and all those different spaces have different costs. A locker room doesn't cost the same as a storage room. And so one of the things that we do, and we can show you a little bit of that, although I'm not going to go into that detail unless you want to be here for many more hours, But that's one way we tested what the right budget was. Another way we did is we looked at a number of comparable schools. And the good thing about inflation, we can always know what it was in the rearview mirror. I don't know what it is going to be the next 2 years. So we could take those schools, escalate those costs, and another way to just compare, are we in the right ballpark for what the community is talking about. So this is showing some shared opportunities for some play fields here. As I mentioned, one opportunity for a middle school that could fit parking. It's also showing some development across the capital. So a piece of property that the district brought a year or so ago, I believe, Paul, just before the ball, maybe just after the ball. One thing that is in the cost of the 49.9 million is developing this, and whether it's 8 tennis courts and more parking, whether it's play fields, certainly a lot of discussion needs to happen with the staff and community on what the best use of that space is, but that is including development of that acreage. So that's something that's a little bit different as far as kind of the scope of the project. And as much as we could, we're trying to have apples to apples comparison between a modernization idea and a new construction, so that you guys have an easier decision, and it isn't, like I said, the SETI report versus what we're doing. And these two sites are enlarged to different scales, so that's kind of a little bit maybe throwing you off. But on the existing middle school site, the area in blue, the newer area that Lauren mentioned that in one scheme was being torn down because it doesn't fit with the historic character of what's there. In the proposal where we build new, part of the thought was to maintain this area, the newer area, and tear down the old historic piece that has, although it has some value historically, and that's something that the community really needs to determine how much value that is to you. But the cost of remodeling that, if you're building new in a different location, certainly has a lot higher cost than to maintain the 94 and the 66 additions. So this idea, if you will, of the concept of the cost for this, besides the $126,000 for the new school, also essentially has an additional 35,000 square feet of space to be used by the school district for other needs. That's certainly something the school district has to address as far as how they would use that program and what things might go in there. It also then has, so in that cost, the $49 million, tearing this down, restoring the whole site, probably to open space, playground kind of space that would be used for the district, for the community use as well. Part of, I've been working with the school district since, as Bill mentioned, the interview process. Steve Walther has been working with the school district for I'm not sure how many years before that. Farley's the one in charge of all that. But going through a similar thing that Lauren and his team did, the study and survey process, that is a process that is done typically every 7 years, but similar thing and coming up with similar results and opinions. Going through the school with our structural engineers, our mechanical engineers, our electrical, all those people, and kind of discovering the same stuff that Lauren is reporting on. It's certainly been part of the process that the school district has went through over the last 8-10 years. I think Bill said even 12 or 14 years. So that's where we're really coming to common ground, I guess, if you will. I think those of you who toured and certainly listened to staff, the needs that are there, and that could be improved educationally. It's certainly an opportunity for how you value the children in your community and opportunities for how you what's best for your community as you respond to that. Other cost thing that was in the difference in the 49.9 million versus Lauren's number. There was money, or there is money in that cost, about $1 million to acquire additional property. Whether that had happened or not, who knows? But at the moment, that was something that was talked about through the last few years to have included in that cost as well. So there's a few items that aren't
as much as we can make it apples to apples, there are some differences that you have to look at, how much area you're getting. I think on both of these, you know, as Lauren mentioned, it's up to you guys, and is 900 students the right amount to build for with future flexibility? Is it 800? There's a number of different ways that you can approach that, which we do on most of our projects. We look at how you would expand, even if you built for 900. We would have one as part of the design process to think about how you might even expand in the future. Certainly some of the infrastructure, some of the main common spaces. You can always add some more classrooms. The student commons, it's tough to add 10% more to that when you add 10% more classrooms. So there's a lot of different things to think through when the discussion is whether it's 900 is the right number or whether 750 is the right number, and how do you maintain the best value in the long run and have that flexibility to expand if necessary. I think with that, I'm going to turn it over and let, anything else, Steve, you want to?
I don't think there's anything else to add. I mean, Lauren covered a lot of the commonalities.
Yeah, and Bill's going to highlight some of the pros and cons back and forth. So. All right. Turn it over to Bill.
We're almost there. Just be patient.
What I'm going to talk about first, or what I'm going to do for you first, is I'm going to summarize what you've just heard. I'm going to show you those things that are common. Lauren did a really good job in actually already dealing with this summary, but let's go through it just quickly. If there's anything that's on the list that you didn't hear as being a common element, let's talk about it. Okay, so everybody on the committee should have this page. And basically, these are the items that are common, whether we're talking modernizing Morgan or whether we're talking a new facility. Common in terms of the two concepts that you've that have just been shared with you. Both are dealing with 126,000 square feet. Both are dealing right now with 900 students. That's what the district believes they need to plan for, and so both plans are dealing with that. Lauren will fit 900 kids into the existing facility, if that's what your choice is, or in the new facility it'll be designed for 900 kids. A key element here that I don't think either talked about is the size of the classrooms that are anticipated. The average classroom size, either concept, will be 900 square feet. If we're going to a science room or something specialized, it'll approach the 1,100 square foot classroom size. So that's all planned in that 126,000 square feet. So that's just where education has gone in terms of having space available. You heard several of the Morgan Middle School staff members mention how they needed additional space to not be bumping into each other, to have the appropriate size for kids. Well, that's what the 900 square foot average classroom size deals with. A key issue that Lauren brought up, the fact that both will comply with WISP. That's not an option. This has to be, Washington State Sustainable Schools Protocol is a state requirement. And what that basically means is that there is cost associated with being very energy efficient and very sustainable in either approach, whether we renovate Morgan or whether we're building a new facility. Cost escalation to 2014, I think Lauren hit on that issue. 2014 just happens to be, as I shared with you earlier, when we hope that we'll be building this school. Pass a bond soon, design the school, and be constructing. And the reason that 2014 is used is, well, that's when the contractor is going to be bidding the work. So that's why we projected out to 2014. Contingency is an item that I don't know that either touched about, but key element. The worst thing that could happen to us on this or any other facility is get 2/3 or 3/4 or 7/8 done with the school and run out of money. I mean, that's what contingency is all about. Two contingency pots are typically used in this type of project. One is called a contractor contingency. Contractor gives us a bid but has something in there to deal with the dinosaur that we find in the field that we didn't know was there, those issues, those unknown site conditions. City decides to interpret code one way, and we've designed the buildings a different way. Those are the types of issues that come into contingency. And then the second contingency part is the owners. I like to call it owner's management reserve. The reason that we have that is because guess what? We'll change our mind before it's over. We'll design it. We'll say that's what we want, but as it's being built, we'll want something different. And if you have that contingency, if you have that ability to change, then you have the ability to pay for that change. So that's what contingency means. And then Lauren also touched on the fact that state match is applicable the same way, either approach. We're going to get somewhere between $10 and $12 billion. And why is there a $2 million fudge factor there? Well, because the formula for state match is a moving target. It all has to do with too many. We've been here long enough tonight. It just is going to be somewhere around $10 to $12 billion. So that's the visible common issues in the two concepts. Any questions?
Yes, I'm not clear on the multiple use performance space. I find that because I heard two gyms, or I heard, are you talking about one gymnasium?
No.
Or what?
We're not even talking gymnasiums. What we're talking about is, Lauren explained the concept for the auditorium, the existing auditorium, how in his concept, in the modernization concept, you would have some flex space in the auditorium that you don't have now. You would have fixed seating up front, up close to the stage for small, I think he described it as smaller performances. And then behind that fixed seating, you would have a multi-purpose area that could be used as part of the cafeteria, could be used for any purpose. And then in a bigger performance, you would bring in flexible seating. You would have chairs, you would have bleachers that fold out, you would have some other element.
But Lauren, you did address that you didn't take into consideration something in your design that came afterwards with the auditorium.
I think what I tried to express is that we heard about the importance of the theater within the community after we had generated the concept. So we tried to modify it somewhat to respond to that community interest in preservation of that old theater.
And Lauren was shown in plan, I think was very similar to what the images that we showed for a potential theater for some of the graphics that were used before the bond.
Same is true with gymnasiums?
No. The gyms will be one of the things that are different.
Okay.
On the different list.
Okay? Let's look at the differences between the two. And again, either Lauren or Ken have already touched on several of these, but I want to make sure that you understand these issues. The way that this is set up, and you can't see it here, but the first item behind the bullet is actually the modernization. The versus is the new. So that's how to read this. So, as an example, the first issue in the modernization, utilization of city streets for drop-off has to be what you accept. That has to be the safety factor that you're good with in terms of how your kids are dropped off every day, how you pick your kids up. How many times you park behind the bus that is blocking Capitol to get to pick up kids at those various times of the day, versus it having the ability in a new approach to build a turnout, to design that area so that you don't have those same issues. The transportation issue was talked about. If we're out in the high school site, closer access to high school programs than busing kids out there, but you do it now, so it must work. Talked about roofs. I don't know how many of you in the room were involved in the high school planning, and there were a bunch of people involved in the high school planning. Pitched roofs was one factor there that everybody demanded. That's why you have such elevations in that high school, is because when you have a building that big, to put a pitched roof on it, you have to have a building that big. I mean, it's just that simple. But that was a key element to the community at that time. The multiple versus single phase construction is a key issue. You have to understand in the modernization program, it's going to be a several year program. There's going to be disruption, hit students and the neighborhood for several years. It's just the nature of the beast. Lauren outlined the approach. You have to tear down, build. And there is that process. Where in a new facility, it's a one-phase process. You're simply building. You're simply constructing.
Do you have a time difference between the two?
Well, we really haven't phased the issue yet, but I would just to answer your question, yes, it would be at least a year, at least a full year. Yeah. Swing space required versus no swing space. Again, that goes with that phasing issue. As we're moving the kids in and out of Morgan, we have to have some place to move them in and out of Morgan. Now you know that can happen because this fall you can move kids in and out of Morgan. You know, eighth graders are going away, and so you can deal with that. But again, how disruptive is that, and what impact does that have on the kids? And then the last issue that I don't know that either of these presentations dealt with really well is just the elimination of that 35,000 square foot of space. And I want to make sure that you're clear on that. Think about that 35,000 that sits here right now. That's not space that's intended for 6th, 7th, or 8th grader use. It's not that quality of education space, but it's for other program needs that the district has. And think about what 35,000 square feet of space will cost. If in fact we have to do, you know, if you decide that we have to fill that space somewhere else. Both estimates are using about $200 a square foot for construction costs. 35,000 times 200 is $7 million. That's hard costs, and we'll talk about hard and soft costs here in just a second. It'll be a very brief discussion. But $7 million in hard costs for bricks and mortar. Add 56% to that for soft costs, the design, and all the other issues I'm going to share with you here in a second. And then 35,000 square foot could be worth $11 to $12 million. So that's an asset that you have to consider in the decision that you make as to whether to go with modernization or a new facility. If you want to keep that 35,000 square feet as an asset to the school district. Okay? Now let's talk about hard and soft costs for just a second. That might make more sense to you.
What about the money here? There's $49 million and 46, but I hear that there's $1 million set off in the 49 for additional property, and I also, what about the demolition of the old building, and then the development of South Capitol is in the 49 million. What is that? So there's differences there.
Well, in the
differences.
In the modernization one, you wouldn't be tearing the building down, or whatever tearing down would be there. So the real difference is the acquisition of property.
There would be no demolition.
No, there would be demolition, but that's included. Whatever demolition that was shown
in 46.
Yeah, that's
no
in there.
problem.
But not the development.
The develop.
Right. Not purchasing additional land is not involved.
But there is $1 million in reserve in the 49 million in building a new building.
Right.
And then there also is the cost of the tennis courts, whatever that is, and what parking on South Capitol.
Right.
I don't know what
That's
that
in the
is.
49.
Another $800,000 to $1 million.
Bill, when you're using the $10 million analogy in order to save this building, I think it's important for people to know it can never be used for scholastic purposes. It only can be used for administrative purposes in order to procure the matching funds from the state. Is that correct?
Which $10 million?
You gave the analogy of this building's capped for the school.
Oh, I just put it. Yeah.
So it's restricted to administrative uses. It can't be used for school uses and still get the matching funds for the new school. Is that correct?
I don't know that to be the case.
That was what Mr. I think his name was Myers said that.
Gary Moore?
Because neither of the spaces we're talking about are eligible for state match anyway.
Okay, thank you. That's what I.
Yeah. So here's as easy as, and I'm not talking down to you when I put it this way. This is just a hard concept for a lot of people who don't deal with this every day to understand. Here's as easy as I can explain hard and soft costs. Think about when you hear the term hard costs, think about bricks and mortar. Think about everything in this room that's not in this room. Think about the walls, the ceiling, and that's hard costs. That's bricks and mortar. So when we're talking hard cost of a building, and I think the hard cost projection by both estimates is somewhere around $28 or $29 million. Is that close? But, but the hard costs are bricks and mortar. Now the soft costs are everything it takes to put the bricks and mortar together. And I've given you a list here. Design and specialty consultants is a soft cost. The state's not even going to talk to the school district about a new school or certainly any state match if they don't hire an architect. That's what design and consultants mean, and there's a significant list of consultants. The construction manager, me, they won't talk to the district if you don't hire a firm like mine. It's a state law. If the building is greater than 50,000 square foot, you have to hire a construction manager. That's the to get state match. You could give up that $10 to $12 billion and not hire me. Ed specs, we talked about that a little bit before. The Ed spec process is really what's going to take us to the next level. It's really what defines all of those spaces that are actually needed to meet the program. It's a significant process. It's a process that I would hope everybody in this room attends. You're all welcome to it. You know, the input. I remember at the high school, and it seems like it was yesterday, but it was a long time ago. I remember the first Ed spec meeting we had in the for lack of a better term, the auditorium space of the high school. You know, that little theater back by the library. The first meeting we had, that room was full because all the good citizens of Ellensburg wanted to give their input to the Ed spec process. They wanted to make sure that what they were getting and that we were dealing with it appropriately. The next week it was half full, and 2 weeks later it was just the design team. But that's part of the issue. You know, that's part of sharing information, and that's part of getting the right design. Special inspection. The state's going to require you to have a specialty consultant come in to test the concrete, to look at the welds on the steel, to do those things that give certification that the facility is safe once it's completed. Sales tax. Guess what? You got to pay sales tax. You know, it's a silly thing. We get the money from the state, but then we give it right back in the sales tax. But it's what has to happen. So you can read the list. All of those issues are soft costs. Now, you can't see it as well there as you can on the individual handouts, but there are some items that are in red. The red basically means you don't have any option if you want state match on those items. In reality, you don't have any option for any of the issues if you want the state to approve the project. The one issue that the state really tries to stay away from is the issue of construction contingency. That's the one item that they really don't try to get involved in, and that's the one item that's on the list that they don't share in some way the cost of that item. They'll share about half of my cost. They'll share about half of the architect's cost. They'll share about, you know, and again, there's a formula for every one of those line items. And so the state share, that $10 to $12 million that I've talked about a couple of times, it all comes from those line items. So when you see the state match, you see three columns basically in the scenario. You see the local share, and guess what? You got to pay the local share before you get the state share. But you see the local share, you see the state share, and then you see the total for every one of those line items. Bricks and mortar first. They'll tell you how much they're going to share in that cost. And then every one of these items, they'll tell you what your share is and what their share is as it relates to the bottom line. Bottom line is, it'll end up to be, we believe at this point, about $10 to $12 million. Now, have I confused you on soft and hard costs? It's an important issue, and it's important from this perspective. when we met a month ago, several weeks ago, to reconcile the modernization budget versus the new building budget, the one issue that we didn't agree on was, one of two issues we didn't agree on was soft costs. The modernization program has 56% as a soft cost factor. So it's the hard cost times 56% equals X, equals the estimated cost of a modernized building. The new building has a soft cost factor of 58%. So there's 2% difference in the numbers that have been reported tonight. 2% of that difference is because we don't agree, the three parties, the two estimates and myself, don't agree on those two elements. But we both, in the spirit of cooperation and trying to do what's best, we both moved our numbers from the initial. One estimate came up, one estimate went down, and we agreed at the 58 for the new school and the 56% for the modernization. Sir.
Should we be considering maintenance and operation costs of the buildings after they're built, or what's going to happen? Costs that are associated with administration, for example, proximity of the high school and the future school, and how should costs like that be?
Also floors. Is there any consideration picking up on that of 3 stories as opposed to 1?
Yeah, let me try to answer one question at a time. Yes, the district needs to consider the maintenance of the facilities. Unfortunately, the state doesn't participate in that from a state match perspective.
But that's important to us.
It is important to you. It's important, and that's one of the things that in the reconciliation that we felt was important, is that the modernization included new MEP, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems, just like a new building would. Because to just fix, and I think Lauren hit on this very well, to just fix that old stuff, it's still going to be old stuff. And believe me, somebody asked earlier about the boiler. Was it you? The boiler was barely fit in this room. And the boiler that will replace that boiler is no bigger than this table. So think about that. Think about where technology has come in 100 years. I think the boiler in there is, it's number one. You know, it is, but that's part of the whole issue, is just making sure that you're looking at all those elements. And what was your question? I'm sorry.
Is there any consideration, I don't know, about a building that's 1 story in terms of maintenance, heating, utilities, as opposed to 3 stories up? I don't know the answer to that. Something tells me it would cost more to pump air up. I know we put things on top and pump down sometimes as well.
And actually, the two different scenarios are looking at a 3-story versus a 2-story. But actually going up saves energy. You have less envelope, less exterior of the building than if you do a 1-story school versus a 2-story. You actually can have some energy savings going to a 2-story. There's actually less envelope. So some of those areas, I mean, maintenance costs for a modernization when you're modernizing it 100%, which is what you would do, versus a new, I don't know there's a lot of difference one way or the other. Some of the operational costs that are certainly there as far as one site versus another site, that's something us architects can't answer. It's more the district as far as moving students and busing and sharing fields and those kinds of things from an operational standpoint that, you know, really the people that run the schools would have to weigh in on that piece.
Is that operating car, or the heating cost, or whatever, is that balanced against cooling costs too? Is that a balance?
Generally have less
energy?
You have less envelope, so yeah, I mean, I think in general.
So what you're saying is 3 stories, just in general, energy-wise, would cost less than 2 stories, regardless of whether we're talking about heating or cooling or the combination of both.
I would say in general it's slightly less. Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't know how you would. I don't know how you would prove that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the important factor is that WISP, again, WISP is going to take care of both issues, and it's going to make it the modernization or the new building is efficient from an electrical and the heating cooling perspective as it could possibly be. You don't use a lesser system in one of the two concepts, I guess is the best way to put it.
So how about 5 more minutes of questions, and then we'll kind of assess whether people want to continue at that point.
Your layout here and the ones that for the new school shows specifically where it's located, and the school board never came out in public and said where they're going to put the school or where their plan was for the new school. So are they now saying that this is the site that we're comparing?
I can't speak for the school board.
That was mentioned on March 30th, I think, in 2011, that Valley View site was mentioned.
Was mentioned as an alternative, but in their bond they put in that they had the money to buy another site. So the school board has never came out and said, this is the site that we're comparing apples to apples. So are we now comparing this site? This is the chosen site?
3 sites potentially on the Valley View area. One would be up in the northeast corner.
But all on that property?
Well, there's a potential for it to be here. There's a potential for it to be here. This, if we were able to expand this site, then there would be a potential here. But this was for co-curricular.
Right. But the school board is saying that it will be
I can't
comparable.
speak for the school board.
Well, you're their spokesman.
No, they're my bosses.
Oh, okay. Is the school board willing to commit that that's the site that we're comparing apples to apples to?
The school board can only speak to motion at an open meeting, and we're in no position now to take that motion.
So we don't know where the site is. We're just saying that this is it.
I think the key difference between the two concepts, Doug, is we know where the site for the Morgan remodel is.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
I mean, there's no question about that, and we know the footprint, and we know that issue, from my perspective, is a situation where we have to fit the program into the building.
Right.
I think Gary Miller made these statements. I wasn't even here. See, and I can tell you what he talked about. So what do you want to do? You want to fit the program into the building, or do you want to design a building that fits the program?
But how can you compare apples to apples if you don't have a site?
Well,
how can you do cost analysis for parking and for busing and for everything else?
If that were the site.
Oh, yeah, okay.
If that were the site, we have based that,
Thank you.
the analysis of the new building on
Based on that site?
Yes.
Correct, thank you.
Yes.
Question. During the tour, we heard that portions of the older building are completely shut down and portions will be used somewhat, and the children will walk outside to access them. This is for next year. Okay, with our 8th graders gone, correct?
Correct.
Correct. Now, in the remodel, we talked about phasing in doing things, and that would mean that wouldn't be possible. What I just described would not be possible because you're going to be working on that stuff.
You could have the blue being used and the
blue will
green
be
being
used.
modernized.
Sure, but currently
Phase
some of the
one.
green's going to get used next year,
Well,
right?
right, so you'd have to
You would
maybe
also-
additional changes programmatically to what you're using.
You may end up having to lay down portables.
Portable. That was my question, because right now the high school's maxed out with another grade level in it. We've got 6 and 7. In the phasing in process, would we ever have to go to fewer than 2 grade levels? I just was wondering.
You would probably need 4 to 5 portables.
4 to 5 portables to make it
Which
doable.
would be like 2. That's in your estimate.
Is that cost?
The portables are not in the estimate.
So that's what you mean by swing space, and that's not in the estimate, correct?
That's correct.
That's correct, okay.
So let me just check in. It's been about 5 minutes. Do you want to keep asking questions as a committee? Okay.
I think so.
Hey, we're
We've
gonna
lived
do
with
it.
it
Why
for
not?
hours,
Yep.
and
Yep.
we haven't had a chance to ask many questions at all.
Can I?
So I want to mention about the hard cost versus soft cost before we got too far off of that. I think some of the major confusion that people have stated about the difference between occupying or renovating the existing building versus building new is that they're comparing just the hard costs of other construction projects they've heard around the state, which is usually what's in newspapers, and not the total project cost, which includes the hard and soft costs. So they hear, middle school XYZ was built for $30 million, and they're thinking, why is our project costing 49? And they're not really looking at the total project cost. They're just looking at the amount of the construction bid that's discussed in the newspaper article and stuff. So I just wanted to point that out, that we need to be careful about that when we're comparing costs of other projects, that we're looking at the total project cost versus.
Information is a dangerous thing. Accurate information is a powerful thing. And that's the unfortunate thing is if you want to compare, and I've stood in front of many of you before and got shot. The arrows came flinging my way because I was trying to explain that Kitty Pass School is nothing like I hope you build here, no matter what you do, remodel or new. I hope you don't put vinyl siding on, and I hope you don't have hotel-type air conditioning units, and I hope you don't do those types of elements that are short-term Band-Aids to a building. So yeah, if you want to compare this 40 whatever million dollars to $15 million at Kitty Pass, and compare an apple to a kangaroo. We're comparing an apple to an apple here, quite honestly. I mean, we're trying to get as, I don't know that we're Macintosh to Macintosh, but but at least it's an apple to an apple in trying to make sure that whether your choice is modernization or whether your choice is new, that we're having new as much as we can have new, so that you're not talking about this 10 years from now when Kitty Pass is replacing their vinyl siding.
So Sue, you had a
That's
follow-up
just
question.
that was a stupid thing to say.
I do want to ask my question, but
Just a real short follow-up. When do we get to see in writing these comparison estimates in a way that we can see them and not just hear about them?
How can you have it without a site? How can you
I'm
have it
not
without
worried
a
about
site?
that because I understand the principle that there are options for the site and they're going to talk about the building.
So you have to have options for your parking, your traffic,
Well,
your transportation, all of that until your site. So you can put plug numbers in for that and assume until you have a site. You can't.
But I can.
I didn't understand it quite that way.
We can give you tomorrow this concept in the cost and this concept in the cost.
Thank you.
The school board
That's
won't
simple.
commit to that.
It's public information. It's information that's available.
That would be helpful.
Nobody's hiding anything.
I know,
here.
it just would be helpful, because it's a lot of numbers and a lot of data to track, and it would be helpful to see it, and I understand the issues.
The reason that we tried to present this the way that we did tonight is because we wanted you to see the comparison as well as you could see it, and to try to understand it as well as you could understand it. And don't take this wrong. It makes a lot more sense to me, because I do this for a living, than it does to some of you who are just involved because you want to be involved. I mean, you're learning what this is all about. But the numbers are what they are. They're estimates, though.
I understand that.
Okay?
But there are going to be differences, there's going to
There
be
are.
some issues.
There are.
Some serious issues.
There are. Because there are.
Thank you.
So, I don't mean for this to sound as naive as it might, but it's a follow-up to Joanne's question, which is basically when we see these reports of these costs and we say, like you say, how come it costs this, but we're looking at this? Is it more likely, just maybe I'll get into this, is it more likely that when a number is reported to the newspaper, they're really reporting the end after the statement? So in other words, they're advertising the cost, whereas with these estimates, we're not taking into account the state match, right? This is the total cost, and the state match comes after. So if we're looking at 44 or 49 or whatever, let's average it. If we're talking about 47 million or something like that on average, and we pay that down, all of a sudden it costs 35 million, right? If we get 12 million, now whichever we choose is now 35 million, which sounds a whole lot more reasonable. But yet, if we try to sell this as, well, it's only going to cost 35 million, and then it costs 49 million, people are going to be incensed that it costs so much more, even though you see what I'm getting at?
I do, but don't, again, try to remember some of what Gary Miller told you 2 weeks ago, I guess it was, when you met. I think he tried to explain to you the difference between front funding and state match.
Yeah.
Front funding is the way that the board presented this this bond request the last time. And what front funding does, it must be getting late, what front funding does is it allows you to be in control of everything, basically. It gives you all the money you need right up front to deal with the project.
And
So
it
you-
also ensures that it's not going to be passed in the sense
That's part of the issue if people don't understand the importance of front funding. But let me go on here just for 1 second. So you have the ability to decide when you want to build a project if you front fund and you have 99.9% assurance that you're not going to run out of money. The other option is to wait for state match and to take that state match and use it some other way. Now, state match comes about August 1st of every year, if it comes. In the last 15, 16, 20 years, it's always been there, but the state's never been at $10 billion or whatever the deficit is right now. It's never been there, so who knows what the future brings in terms of will it be there when you need it. So the worst thing that you could do, in my view, is have a $48 million project where you had $36 million to build it with, hoping that you get the other 12 from the district.
Right.
Or, I mean, from the state.
Yeah.
Because then what do the voters think the next time you have to do this is, yeah, that's a nice half of middle school that you built.
Can the voters get assurances that if the state match comes, that the money will be used to pay down the bond earlier?
Actually, that was the high school approach. You know, that when you passed the bond in '01.
But they didn't do it. They spent $4 million in other things.
Well, I mean, can you get that assurance?
How you spend that state match is something that you have control.
Would you let Farley
The
explain?
school board says it's not accurate.
Well, jump up here and tell us what is.
How many times does it have to be, how many times does it have to be communicated? But at any rate, $5 million was used to pay down the debt. That's why the rate went down to 56 cents per $1,000 of assessed value for the last 5 years. And that's why it's kicking back up about another dollar or so per $1,000 of assessed value. And for the last 5 years, about $5 million has been used to pay down the debt.
And what was the total matching fund, Farley, when they did the high school? That's what I'm saying. What was the matching fund and how much got spent other than defeasing the bond?
We went back out to the public.
I understand, sir, but that's not the question.
I'm answering your question.
Okay.
We went back out to the public, and there were several needs the district had. One had to do with Mount Stewart. There was a roof that needed to be fixed. There were indoor gutters in the library at Mount Stewart.
We just passed the M&O levy.
There were buckets in the hallway, and the M&O levy doesn't cover this.
But that's maintenance operation. Okay.
No, a capital levy covers it, not an M&O.
But basic, how much of the state matching fund from the high school went to defease the bond? That's the question. Not where it went, what's the question?
Well, you need to know where it went.
What? I'm asking the question.
I'm trying to tell you.
No, you're not.
No, you're not.
You're trying to tell where you spend it somewhere else. We want to know how much went on the high school bond.
So let's talk about Morgan Middle School. And you sound like the committee is saying, if we were to do a full front first bond for all the fees being paid for the hard cost and soft cost, could there be a commitment that would say any funds that come from state match would go towards paying down this bond, independent of what's happened in the past? That's a concern. It's a concern that's expressed by Doug. It's a concern expressed by community members. And so that's a question that the committee can ask of the school board, and the school board can take that up into consideration. We're talking about the future here and what's going to work for Morgan Middle School, rather than trying to sort out to parse the past. So, is there any other committee questions? Yeah.
I have one follow-up, and that is, you mentioned that you looked at finishes, and what was sort of was used in the high school, and that you would consider that, and I'm just wondering, what are we on the same page on finishes? And also, what is the finish of the high school considered just for us who walked around the high school and know what it is, what would you consider the finish of the high school?
I think we are on the same page in terms of finishes, because we've looked at, when you look at the total cost of the square foot of building, it's about the same between both estimates. We're $1 or $2 difference, which is nothing, $200 per square foot. I think the high school is moderate finishes. It's not extravagant, it's not cheap, it's not the vinyl siding kind of stuff that we heard about earlier. So it's in that middle range, and I think that's I would put forth that for a school building for that 30, 50-year cycle, we need to use good materials that are going to last for a while, and that's the kind of finish we targeted in our costs. I believe you guys did too. Correct?
Yeah, some of the things that we have talked about, the school district has talked about at the high school is certainly starting that, and also looking at how's it holding up, and are there some areas, hallways and gypboard that you might improve a little bit of the durability. Part of the cost of the high school that Bill talked about was, the sloped roof. If you do a sloped roof and you have all that volume, there's a lot of extra, volume there that certainly has a cost to it. It's a concern certainly that's been expressed. The level of finishes from a durability, I think we're on the same page.
Oh, we're talking carpet in areas that should be carpeted. We're talking polished concrete and, areas that could have a lesser finish. Walk the high school, look at the hallways, look at the various elements, look at the light fixtures, look at those types of issues, and that'll give you they're both right there.
Thank you.
My assumption is that in the estimates, what we're talking about is construction. We're not necessarily talking about desks, or are we?
No, they are. FF&E includes desks.
Desks.
And again, both concepts are assuming that it's brand new everything. That was the concept of the high school. You had a high school full of old stuff, and part of the reality here, and believe me when I tell you this, Paul hit on how crime, if you want to call it that, how fighting went down from the new to the old. Part of the issue here is how the kids receive that new space. And they're going to receive it a lot better, and the community is going to receive it a lot better if you go that extra mile and deal with that newer stuff. There might be stuff that we can sell, but you don't throw it away. You sell it to another school district. That's what we did with the old high school. There was nothing that went to the landfill. It now is over at Warden School District, or it's in some other school district because we felt that the right thing to do at the high school was to equip it with all new stuff.
One of the two is I'm hearing two significant differences between remodel and new. One is the extra 35,000 square feet that the district could use here. So this is a two-part question. What does the district need that for? And in a remodel, how are you going to solve that problem? Because we don't have that 35,000 square feet. And the second question has to do with the parking issue, the safety parking issue, which I understand is a value judgment on the community. I did it for 13 years, folks, at 815 and 315. I know how to double and triple park. It's an art. It does. Do you offer a class on that? I'll tell you in a minute. Okay. But that's a significant difference, correct? Because at the new building, we would have a safety parking issue. I mean, we wouldn't have the.
It's a different scenario. Yes.
Okay, but does it have a monetary value difference to it? Does it? See what I'm saying?
First,
You'd have to buy.
Paul, why don't you identify those? Hold on.
This area, this 35,000 square feet, we're paying for for space at Central, for our developmental preschool. We're paying for space for alternative program, that's at Central. We are paying the Methodist Church for our parent partnership program we house in their basement. There is also people have expressed a concern for what they call a curriculum library, in order so that parents can come in and look